Welcome to today's full council meeting. A particular welcome to those watching online and joining us in the chamber. There will be a 1 hour lunch break around about 12:30, depending on how business is progressing, and comfort breaks as necessary. Before we begin, I would just like to take a second to pay tribute to Dr. John Halbert, a former provost who, as well as his long career in medicine, firstly in research, then laterally as a GP, supporting the health in the community, also served as a councillor for the Carse of Gowrie for many years and as provost from 2007 to 2012. He was incredibly enthusiastic about civic matters. He was involved heavily in leading the campaign to restore city status to Perth. He led the Perth 800 anniversary celebrations. I know that he was very proud when Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh visited in the summer of 2012, which was the culmination of a number of those successful campaigns. He took great interest in our twinning relationships, and he continued to be very active, all the way up until very recently, in our twinning relationship, in particular with Poland, and he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Order of Merit of the Republic of Poland in 2013 in recognition of the good relations that he had fostered between our city and Bydgoszcz in Poland. He also wrote a number of books during his time, so I think we could quite frankly say it was a life very well lived and very accomplished. So we pay tribute to him, and our thoughts are obviously with his wife and family at this time. We now move on to take a roll call of those joining online and also note any apologies.
Can members hear me now? Oh,
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. So in terms of those members who are online, can they confirm that they are present? So I think Bailey.
Present, thank you.
And Councillor Kogali.
Yes, I can hear you.
I think Councillor Forbes as well.
Yes, good morning, I'm here.
And Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Yes, here, Scott.
And I think we also have Councillor Carol Mayer online.
Yes, present, thank you.
Are there any other members online? No, all other members are in the Chamber's provost.
Thank you very much. Members, we now move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in any of the items on today's business? I don't see any declarations of interest intimated, therefore move on to item 3.1, which is the minute of the meeting of the Predetermination Committee of the 10th of December 2025. Are members happy to approve the minute of the Predetermination Committee? Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Members, are we now moving to item 3.2, which is the minute of the meeting of Perth and Kinross Council of the 10th of December 2025. Councillor Colin Stewart, I see you have a question on the December Council minute. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. At the December meeting, we considered the recommendations in relation to 1 to 5 High Street. There was a private briefing over lunchtime, firstly with the proposed developers, and then separately an opportunity to ask some private questions of officers. I asked whether there had been any interest expressed in by anybody else in 1 to 5 High Street, and I was told that there hadn't been, but there's obviously a story in the Courier this morning saying that there was a businessman who'd expressed interest twice after Henley Homes went into administration, and I just wondered what effect that could have had on the council's decision-making process in December, given that we were not in full possession of the facts. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pass this to our strategic lead for legal and governance.
Morning, Councillor. In terms of the response that you received from officers at the time, that was accurate. I know I'm aware of the article in the paper today, but I haven't actually read it. But in terms of there being no bidder as part of the formal bidding process, that was correct. And what happened was we had a preferred bidder. We continued to work with that, with the preferred bidder, and worked through arrangements, and then presented options back to council just a month or so ago, in which council agreed to continue to work with Loch Terrace. So that point is there was no other formal intimation of anybody being involved in the bidding process. So the response that you received at the time was accurate.
I've got a point of clarification from Councillor Lane.
I think we're getting slightly, in my view, in semantics here. The question, and I've checked up and my memory is normally quite good, was has there been any interest from any other body? Nothing about a formal bid, nothing about working as a preferred bidder after collapse. The question was quite specific. Was there any other interest expressed to officers? And the answer was no, there has been no other interest, which is a different question than to the question that was answered there. Thanks.
I think the Chief Executive is going to answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think there's maybe a bit of confusion. In terms of formal bidding, absolutely not. Subsequent to the meeting, when the question was raised about other interest, and I think the suggestion of an email sent to the council, it was the case that an email, or maybe even a couple of emails, were sent by a party. That has been checked by officers. But officers proceeded on the basis of us working with the preferred bidder, as council had instructed. When we brought the paper back to December, it would have been in council's gift at that time to make a decision to reopen the bidding process, but effectively council chose to continue in December. But there was an email from a businessman, but no particular kind of bid as such, just that they were interested. I can confirm there was an email.
Councillor Stewart, you have a further question?
Yes, so I think the point that the Chief Executive has just made raises a further question, or raises exactly the same question. If council had known about another expression of interest, we may have chosen to reopen the bidding process and subsequently appoint a different preferred bidder, but we didn't know, so we were making that decision in a vacuum of information. My original question was, what effect could that information have had on the decision that council took in December? And I think what the Chief Executive has just confirmed is that it could have changed the outcome, and therefore that lack of information has affected the council's decision-making process, hasn't it?
I think members will have to determine for themselves whether that would have changed their opinion on the matter. I think we have clarified that subsequent to the meeting, it has been established that there was interest expressed by a party, and therefore that is now the official position that has been confirmed. Members, as I say, will need to make their own minds up as to whether they would have voted differently had they been in possession of that information at the time. Unless there are further questions, I think I'm going to move on. Councillor Lane, you want to come in?
It doesn't really matter if people were going to change their vote or not. You know, that ship has sailed. But if you ask a question on an important subject such as this, and a straightforward one-word answer would have been, there was some, whether the interest, I don't know if the interest was credible or not. The question didn't ask if it was credible. It didn't ask if it was involved with anything. It was a contentious issue. There was a lot of discussion in the chamber. That question in private, if it had been factually answered, should have been, there has been interest, but if it's not credible, it wasn't in time, or that should have been the answer to the question, because the question didn't go on to ask anything else, but was there interest from anybody else?
Okay, I'm going to suggest that officers will provide a written briefing after the council on this matter for all elected members, detailing the timeline and what occurred, so that every member is fully informed of and in possession of all of the facts. Is that acceptable?
I think that would be.
Sorry, Councillor Stewart, yes, continue.
To just answer your question, I think that would be helpful, Provost, but I think it would also be helpful if the briefing note could indicate whether this information indicates a material change in circumstances and whether the decision could be revisited. Thank you.
Okay, we will ensure the briefing note covers that point as well. Councillor Dave Cuthbert, you also have a question.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I'd like that report to incorporate the justification for negotiating with the directors of Loch Terrace, because the original decision of council was to do a development lease with Henley Homes Group. Henley Homes Group has gone into liquidation, so I'd like the report to incorporate the sort of justification for just dealing with the directors.
I would think that our briefing on the matter around the interest will reflect why officers made the decisions they made, and that would address that question as well. Bailey Ahern.
Yeah, given that the discussion we're having just now is as a result of it being in the papers, and the discussion we're having now is in public, can we please ensure that the response from officers is also made public and not just kept as a private briefing to elected members?
Yes, I think we can. We would normally publish elected member briefing notes online unless there is specialist information that is confidential. And I would imagine that given one of the parties involved has already published information, they would probably be quite happy that that is in the public domain. So we'll make sure that it's put in a format that can go into public domain and therefore is publicly accessible. Thank you. Point of clarification, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Provost. I welcome getting this report and further information, as we always do as councillors. That's due diligent process. It seems that independent councillors are all heavily briefed on this. I would also like to know when they became available of this information, and whether that was before we met at committee to discuss this before Christmas or not, and why they wouldn't have brought that information to the full council during our deliberations at the time. It just seems really odd that this is coming out in discussion on the minutes of the last meeting. It seems a very opportune way of doing this with a media release prior to it.
My recollection of Councillor Stewart's follow-up was that he did say he was of the understanding that there was interest, but I will let him confirm that if he wishes.
Because if we're going to be open and honest about this, everybody needs to be open and honest about this.
If you want me to come in, Provost, I had seen a partial email, but I hadn't been able to see a full email trail or be able to verify what I was seeing. So that was all I had to go on, and I had hoped that officers would have also been in possession of that information.
Thank you. If we have no other questions on this, plan to agree the minute. We're happy to agree the minute. Agreed. Okay,
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on, item 4 is a motion by Councillor Peter Barrett, seconded by Bailey Ahern. Councillor Barrett.
Good morning, councillors. Can you tell me, is that microphone working? Great, thank you. Councillor Ahern and I are pleased to bring this motion to Council today as we seek to address an issue that has been brought to our attention regularly by city centre businesses at the Perth Business Safety Partnership. That was a partnership that was originally formed out of the concerns and frustrations of high street and city centre businesses about the shoplifting epidemic, and we spent the last 3 years working constructively together to address those concerns. However, at the same time, shops and businesses and local residents have become increasingly frustrated by the unregulated buskers playing too loudly for too long and sometimes too badly outside their homes and business premises. In some instances, local residents have been targeted for abuse and loud playing in front of their homes in response to having asked buskers to turn it down or move on. Unlike residents who on the high street live above the ground level and can shut their windows in winter, although not something that they can do to the same extent during the summer months to try and keep the din out of amplified music, shops have opened doors, and if they're in the vicinity of the ring sculpture at the junction of the High Street and King Edward Street, are severely exposed to noise from buskers. Perth is almost unique among Scottish cities in not having a buskers code of conduct. Stirling are the only city not to have introduced one apart from ourselves, and I've got examples from Edinburgh, from Dundee, and from Glasgow, but even Dunfermline and Inverness have buskers codes of conduct as well. They're not all identical, but they do have consistent themes and broadly similar limitations and desired outcomes. Those codes of conduct limit the duration of busking sessions, the volume of performances, restrictions on amplification, and things like rotation and circulation around permitted sites, distances between busking performers, prevention of obstruction of the footway, proximity to cash machines, and respect for members of the public and businesses. To be honest, they're all good, sensible measures that I think most people would be hard-pressed to argue against. And I'm not talking about killing off the local street musical scene, but I am sure that many of you, like me, have endured loud buskers outside Next that you can hear from South Street, or that you can hear from these council offices, or even from the viewpoint on Tay Street. And when the sound is coming from talented musicians and singers, that is beyond, even when it's coming from talented musicians and singers, that is beyond what local residents should have to endure. And I don't buy the response from some people that if you choose to live in the city, that sort of noise nuisance is something that you're obliged to put up with and accept. I profoundly disagree with that, and I want to tell you briefly about the experience of one of my constituents who contacted me in support of introducing a code. He has lived in the city centre for 17 years. Not until recent years has busking been an issue, but now for him, working from home is disrupted due to the noise and proximity of buskers. He's had clients tell him to turn off his radio and criticism made of him playing music during meetings and how that is unprofessional. He has a health condition which requires him to take a sleep break during the day, and despite investing in sound-deadening earplugs, his sleep is still disturbed at that time. 17 years ago, cheap battery-powered amplification was not available to buskers. Now it is almost ubiquitous, and long-term city centre residents are suffering as a consequence, and not people who simply pass by or stop for 5 minutes. It may seem unlike me, but I haven't attempted to draft a code of conduct myself. As I said, there is plenty from which to draw from other Scottish cities' codes, and I think it is important to put a menu of options before key stakeholders, businesses, residents and buskers themselves, to develop a code that is best for Perth and then bring it back to Council or the appropriate committee for approval. When Councillor Drysdale took on the leadership of the Council, local businesses were encouraged by his comments that he made regarding the priority that he put on tackling antisocial behaviour in the city centre and how the Council would respond to their concerns about busking, as well as other issues about particular individuals and shoplifting. As I said, we're progressing well with actions to deter shoplifting, working in partnerships with businesses, ShopSafe Radio, retailers against crime, community safety and resilience teams and the police, and we are making progress. A buskers code of conduct is something where we've now, until now, lagged behind other Scottish cities, and I think the time is right and the circumstances require us to change that. So please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Bailey Ahern, second.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm seconding this motion because I think some control is needed on our high street for the playing of music and the entertainment of the public. Despite what people have said in social media, this code of conduct is by no means us wanting to stop buskers, as they are a long-standing culture in our high street, and some of our country's best performers started as buskers: Ed Sheeran, Tracy Chapman, Rod Stewart. I could carry on and on. The fact is, it will give better opportunity to more people to entertain us on the high street. What we hope to do by introducing this code and follow cities, as has been said, like Edinburgh, Glasgow and Dundee, is to make the busking experience more pleasant for all concerned. Having this code will make it much clearer for everyone, and it must be stated that, as in other cities, we are not asking for licensing of buskers or the introduction of bylaws. We're asking that they follow this code of conduct. As it works elsewhere, it should not be a problem here. This code of conduct will be written, then go out to consultation. That means businesses and the public can have their say and shape the code. From the consultation, as Peter has just said, it can then go to whichever committee is required to have a look at it and agree whether it goes ahead or not. I hope you'll support our motion, as this allows us to move forward to help make the entertainment on our high street more enjoyable for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey Ahern. Alistair Bailey, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to those who've brought the thoughtful motion on buskers today. I agree that this is definitely an area worth us looking at. While buskers bring much needed vibrancy to our city centre, we all want to ensure it's an enjoyable and inclusive place for all. However, given the funding limitations we face these days, I'm concerned that this motion skips a step, and that could result in unnecessary outlay on the part of the council. Specifically, we should first take steps to define what problems are before we invest further time and effort into coming up with solutions. Maybe it's my training as an engineer from all those years ago, but I naturally flinch any time someone proposes solutions before gathering data on the problem. And that's what this motion does currently. It assumes that a code of conduct is the right solution to a problem that's not yet well defined. We should also confirm whether or not existing regulation can be used to solve any problems we face. I worry too that the type of busker who engages already in antisocial behaviour as described by the mover and seconder would also happily ignore a PKC code of conduct. Most of us know that these behaviours are not appropriate, so I don't know that waving a piece of paper with code of conduct and a PKC logo on top of it helps. I'm therefore adding bylaws to the options that officers can recommend to us if they see fit. I acknowledge these require a ministerial consent prior to enactment. So I put this amendment before you for your consideration and in order to also help with the problem, if there is any problem, with antisocial behaviour among buskers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Bailey Brock, you're seconding.
Yes, Provost, happy to second this amendment.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, we move to debate on this item. Does anyone wish to comment on it? Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Provost. And yeah, I think I fall in favour of the amendment. I think something should be done. I'd like to see what the outcomes of the codes of conduct in these other areas were. If we're talking about an hour to play at one place, who times the person that's there? And do we have somebody there moving other people out, or is it done voluntarily? Which, if disturbances are caused, would probably cause even more disturbances at the end of every hour. So I'd like to see how it would work. Being a rural elected member, I've not really had any complaints about this. I do have many complaints though, and get complaints about coming to Perth, the city centre of Perth, where you have people collecting for charities, not staying within a certain area, but approaching people in the street, three width that people can't go past. And I think that's something else that we need to look at, and maybe bring a motion to look at that, and because we don't enforce that at the present time. So this is another motion that we're bringing here that I don't think that we as a local authority will enforce without more work done on it. So I think I'll support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Harvey next.
Thank you, Provost. Apologies, I've been away the weekend. I didn't notice this motion, but I just would like to comment about this as a city centre resident. I personally don't have any issues with the buskers in town, and I'm not very sure where the comments come from, because my neighbours would say the same. I'm going to support the amendment because I think we need to do a bit more work on this before we actually try to enforce it, because I don't personally perceive there to be a huge problem here compared to other places. I think there's other issues we should be spending time on as regards the city centre, particularly regards security, shoplifting and other things like this, and this doesn't seem to be the most important thing we need to deal with presently. I'll happily support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor McEwen next.
Thanks very much. I welcome this motion. I think that we do have to ensure that people don't behave in a way that disturbs others, whether it be businesses, sleepers, people who work shift patterns and have to sleep during the day, etc. These things all are essential for a normal society to function properly. But I do accept that Bailey's amendment does drill more into the detail of the complicated box that we're opening here. You know, I'm not sure you can turn down the volume of bagpipes, but I'm not sure we want to bang bagpipes being played in our city centre should somebody want to do so for their busking. But I think it opens lots of things. Councillor Lane talks about enforcement. As soon as we introduce a guideline, a policy and enforcement, then there's an obligation on us as a council to ensure that that's followed. Therefore, what is the resource needed for our communities team through community safety to actually ensure that any policy that we try to introduce or back as a council is implemented? So, you know, all these different questions need to be teased out. So I think, again, I think Bailey is pointing out things that are very valid for the officers to take forward, then for the council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Rebick next.
Thanks very much, Provost. I like a busker, but I'm also very aware that I'm one of those people that Councillor Barrett mentions, that stands and looks for 5 or 10 minutes, or as I pass by, as somebody who represents the housing schemes of North West Perth, I don't have to live in the city centre. So I think Councillor Barrett's motion does allow us to live and let live, and I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. Councillor Duff next.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I've obviously listened to the motion and the amendment. The motion is coming from ward members who are the ones who will know best in relation to the issues to do with buskers and what the solution would be. As far as I'm aware, the other cities that they talk about having had codes of conduct don't have bylaws, and the codes of conduct seem to be sufficient for them. So I'm quite happy that the motion at this point in time will be sufficient to take forward as part of the issue. So I'm happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Mayor next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm also happy to support the motion, although I quite understand the pragmatism behind Bailey's suggested amendment. My reason for supporting the motion is because I think that it would give, having a code of conduct might give more opportunity for our young musicians, particularly those perhaps who are studying in Perth, to be able to play their, which is quite often a quieter and gentler kind of music than that which we hear from the professional buskers who obviously go around all the city centres. And I very much welcome any kind of code of conduct, which means that it's possible for us to hear all kinds of music when we pass through the city centre as a shopper or a tourist, but preferably not all kinds of music all at the same time and in the same place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mayor. Councillor Frampton next, please.
Thank you. I do welcome this motion. I have witnessed altercations in the high street with various buskers vying for the space that they want to play in when someone else is there. I've also witnessed residents coming down onto the street to complain to the buskers about the noise level. These ones were complaining because they were on night shift and couldn't get any sleep during the day for the noise levels. I do think it's something that does need to come into effect. So yes, I agree with the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frampton. Councillor McCall next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Although I'm not a councillor for the city centre, I do live in the city centre and frequent it from time to time. I think the motion is more than sufficient to give officers the steer to develop a code of conduct, and I have quite confidence, or good confidence, in the officers' ability to consider all of the various aspects that they need to look at and bring forward a code of conduct that will hopefully address everybody's concerns in this chamber. So I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Bailey McLaren next.
Thank you, Provost. Just briefly, I hadn't actually intended to speak on this, but just a comment I will make from 2 or 3 points of view. I used to have a business in just off the high street. Yes, there are issues with this, and I also agree with Councillor Duff and the other who have said that they feel that the motion has enough detail in it. It's bring forward a draft code of conduct. So at that point, we could as a council decide that that wasn't strong enough. But a marker should be placed here on this. We also haven't taken into account sometimes people who are in the high street who find it too uncomfortable and leave quicker than they intended to. So there's unintended consequences of busking, but there's also extremely good positive consequences. I'm very aware of a friend's son who started as a busker and now has a blossoming career in music and has moved to Glasgow to do so. And he commented when he was busking some of these challenges that have been that were spoken about by Councillor Hearn and Councillor Barrett. So I feel that this amendment has enough detail in it. This motion has enough detail in it to proceed without the addition of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey McLaren. I'm not seeing any further requests for comment, and therefore I'm going to go to Bailey to sum up.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the constructive comments across the chamber. I agree completely with the proposer and seconder and all those who've spoken that action is needed in this area. Voting for my amendment is a vote for ensuring that the action we take are well matched to the problems on the ground. I'd also like us to take care that we first review the tools already at our disposal and ready for enforcement are well understood prior to spending precious time and money on more. I'll leave you all with a question. Fast forward to the meeting where the draft code of conduct comes before us. How will we know if it solves the problem if we haven't passed my amendment today and don't have data about what the problem is? Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Peter Barrett to sum up.
Good morning again, councillors. I'm grateful to Bailey, who gave me foresight of his amendment before it was introduced to the chamber today, and I take Alistair's justification for putting forward the amendment at face value. However, if I was watching an episode of Yesminster, and you were looking for civil servants to give you the ABC how to avoid taking action on any political initiative, then they're going to tell you, firstly, that the problem hasn't been defined sufficiently. Secondly, that you need to consider all other alternatives, probably even convene a focus group and get some specialist input. And I appreciate that Alistair hasn't gone as far as that, but certainly A and B are blatant attempts to kick it down the road. And I don't think that we should go down that route. As other speakers in the debate have said, codes of conduct have been introduced in other cities without the need to consider bylaws. Bylaws, as I've discovered to my cost with regard to things like jet skiing in Perth city centre, are almost nigh on impossible to progress in any short period of time. And I think that the problem is sufficiently well defined. It happens between Canole Street and T Street on the High Street and in King Edward Street, and affects adjoining streets, and it impacts severely on local residents and businesses. I'm not entirely sure that the issue is linked to chuggers, charity salespeople in the high street. Those people don't impact or affect people in their homes or businesses. Some people might find them an inconvenience on the high street. Others may be perfectly happy to spend the time of the day with them and decide if they want to give money to those causes. I think in terms of what Ken says, we are addressing the other issues, and I think the leader of the council has made it clear that tackling antisocial behaviour in the city centre is a priority. Myself and Councillor Ahern have kind of put in the long hours over the last 3 years with the Perth Business Safety Partnership, encouraging city centre businesses to take up the Shop Safe radio, to join retailers against crime, to communicate far better amongst themselves, to alert each other to potential troublemakers in the city centre. So, this isn't happening in a vacuum. And sometimes you need a multi-stranded approach to tackle the whole situation. In terms of enforcement and additional costs, we already have the community resilience and safety team members in the high street, providing a uniform presence as a deterrent to shoplifters and antisocial behaviour. They, with the added tool in their toolkit of a code of conduct, will be able to intervene with buskers who are not adhering to the code of conduct. So, I think sometimes, it's incumbent upon this council to act, when residents and businesses have identified a clear problem that's within our gift to solve. So let's solve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. We now move to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. We're dealing with item 4 on the agenda. We have a motion by Councillor Peter Barrett, seconded by Bailey Ahern, the terms of which are included within your papers. We have an amendment by Bailey, seconded by Bailey Brock, the terms of which were shown on the screen and posted in the meeting chat. So when I call out members' name, can they confirm if they're voting for the motion by Councillor Barrett or the amendment by Bailey? Bailey Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Bailey Brock.
Amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Frampton.
Motion.
Councillor Freshwater.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor Kugali.
Motion.
Councillor Lang.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Mayer.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren,
Motion.
Deputy Provost,
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck,
Motion.
Councillor Robertson,
Motion.
Councillor Shires,
Motion.
Councillor Smith,
Motion.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Amendment.
Councillor Watt,
Motion.
Councillor Waters,
Amendment.
Councillor Welsh,
Amendment.
and Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Provost, we have 26 votes for the motion and 12 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Members, move on to item 5, which is the outstanding business statement. Are there any questions on the outstanding business statement? If there are no questions on the outstanding business statement, I would like to notify Council that the item on the outstanding business statement is complete, and therefore are members happy to remove the completed actions from the outstanding business statement? Agreed. Thank you very much. Members, we now move on to item 6, which is the historic Tinker experiment and apology. And if you just wait 2 seconds, please, while we bring in some of the families who are affected by it. Members, we now move to item 6, the historic Tinker experiment and apology. Before we begin, I would like to welcome Mr. Stewart and family and the McPhee family, who are families who are affected by this Tinker experiment, into our gallery today. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'd now like to come to Elaine Ritchie, Strategic Lead for Housing and Communities, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. I'm honoured to present this report to full Council, which addresses a significant chapter in the history of Perth and Kinross, the legacy of the Tinker experiment and its impact on the Gypsy traveller community. I'd also like to express my sincere thanks to the residents of Bobbin Mill for their valuable feedback on this report and for their ongoing commitment to engaging constructively with the Council. This report seeks members' approval to issue a formal apology for the role played by local authorities in implementing historic policies and procedures known as the Tinker experiment. Between the 1940s and 1980s, these policies, supported by successive UK governments, the Scottish Office, local authorities and the Church of Scotland, were designed to forcibly assimilate Gypsy traveller families, often resulting in profound and lasting harm. The Tinker experiment involved the forced settlement of families in substandard housing, threats and incidents of child removal, segregation and cultural suppression. The Bobbin Mill site in Pitlochray stands as one example where families were accommodated in overcrowded Nissen huts, lacking basic amenities, and children were sent to institutional care when the site became overcrowded. Recent research commissioned by the Scottish Government and a formal apology issued by the First Minister in June 2025 have highlighted the widespread institutional discrimination and lasting legacy of these policies. The Council recognises the deep regret and the responsibility for the suffering endured by generations of Gypsy traveller families in Perth and Kinross. This report not only acknowledges the historical injustices, but also sets out a series of actions to ensure our apology is meaningful and leads to lasting change. These include formal acknowledgement, community engagement, improvement of living conditions, restorative justice, education awareness, policy review, and dedicated support for the Gypsy traveller residents. The Council remains firmly committed to enhancing outcomes for the Gypsy traveller communities as reflected in our ongoing action plan and substantial investments in accommodation standards such as the transformation of the Double Dyke site and the ongoing works regarding enhancements to the accommodation and site at Bobbin Mill. Issuing a formal apology represents an important step in building trust, strengthening relationships and reinforcing our commitment to fairness, inclusion and respect for all communities. Members are invited to consider the recommendations and support the actions outlined in this report, ensure that Perth and Kinross Council continues to lead by example in recognising past wrongs and shaping a more inclusive future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First question from Councillor Forbes.
Elaine, thanks for that introduction to the paper. I can't exactly remember the words you used, but I think you suggested that Bobbin Mill was one of the sites, and therefore, by implication, there were other sites across Scotland. Is that the case? Can you tell us where the other sites were, and have the local authorities that are in control of those sites, have they issued formal apologies in their areas?
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. The other 5 local authorities were Dundee, Fife, Glasgow, Highlands and the Western Isles, and as of yet they have not issued any formal apology.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you. This is undoubtedly a terrible thing that happened, and it's sad to know that this local authority or its predecessors were complicit and part of it. But I'll save most of those thoughts for comments. I wanted to ask about one of the statements that's made on page 27. So my first question is that it mentions there under improvement of living conditions under the actions and says all accommodation will ensure continuing where possible, consider how the planned improvements at Bobbin Mill could be accelerated to ensure all accommodation meets modern standards for safety, comfort and dignity. So my first question is, to what specific extent does the accommodation at Bobbin Mill still not meet those comfort, safety and dignity standards? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Bailey. In terms of not meeting standards, it's the minimum site standards that it falls short on, and that's what we're currently undertaking a feasibility study to address that. Some of it that we probably will, where possible, that's why it says where possible in the report, is we don't actually own the site, we lease the site from a landowner, and there is some upgrading work that needs to be done to the road, security issues, and we don't have approval to proceed with some of the work that's required to meet those conditions.
Okay, and may I cover my second question now, Provost?
Yes, please.
On a similar thread, can we have any reassurance that the current tenants of Bobbin Mill are now all council housing tenants with the exact same rights as someone who, for example, is a tenant of maybe a council property out by me, say in Errol? So are they paying a comparative level of rents? Do they get to participate in the tenant participation activities and vote on rent setting, etc.? Or are there any regards in which the tenants of Bobbin Mill are still treated differently to other PKC housing tenants? Thank you.
Bobbin Mill residents actually have a reduction in the rent because a reflection of the condition of their chalets, but they do have all the same rights as other tenants in terms of tenant participation. They have a dedicated officer that goes up to the site regularly, and we've also invested in a Gypsy Traveller officer. So they do have the same rights and we treatment as our other tenants in terms of our policies and practices.
Thank you for that reassurance.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mayor next, please. You have 2 questions.
Thank you, Provost. And one is actually just a tiny clarification. I note on page 28 at 7.3 where it says the site now comprises 6 chalets, which older caravans, many of which were owned. I think perhaps there is a word missing there, and I think the word is possibly replaced. I think the sentence should probably be the site now comprises of 6 chalets which replaced older caravans. And I just wondered for people reading this in future if that word might be added or corrected, as is the case. So that's page 28 at 7.3, the 3rd line down. My actual question was to do with the dedicated support and representation, and that on page 28 at point 7.5. It says that to further support residents, the council has funded a dedicated Gypsy Traveller Officer post. And my question to do with that was, is this role specifically going to be aimed at, I mean, I know there is already somebody in post, but, you know, as it goes on, is this role specifically aimed at being occupied by suitable candidates from within the Gypsy Traveller community themselves? And if not, are there plans in place to encourage this in the future? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mayor. It's a typo. It should say with, because there are caravans that belong to the residents still on site. So apologies for that. I was picked up, before, whilst the papers were released. Your second point, yeah, the post has been filled, and yeah, it would have been great if we could have got a member with lived experience in that post, but unfortunately we weren't. But yeah, that would be something that we would aim to do if that post became vacant.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Braun next.
Thanks, Provost. Elaine, I'm not sure you might not be able to answer this, but from what you were saying about Bobbin Mill, the intricacies of the site, I mean, have we got some sort of timescale we're working to? Because you're talking about the freeholders, the leaseholders, legal implications. These things can drift if we're not careful. Are we working to some sort of timescale, or can we implement some sort of timescale to get things moving so this doesn't drift for months into years?
Yeah, so we have made some progress with our feasibility study at Bobbin Mill. So we've had 2 workshops held at Bobbin Mill with the residents. We've just received their survey feedback just before Christmas, and we hope to have individual meetings with the residents to go over their feedback, and that will then allow us to design what those chalets will be. So we are committed to delivering on that. We do recognise those chalets need to be replaced, but we need to work with the residents on what they want from their homes and what they want to look like. So there will be a timeline, but it will be driven in partnership with the residents.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank Elaine and David for their work on the report, and we'll now move to Councillor Drysdale to move the report.
Thank you, Provost. And before I begin, can I just take this first opportunity I've had to thank colleagues from across the Chamber, officers, members of the local media, and so many others for the kindness and compassion you've all shown me since the passing of my beloved wife, Elizabeth. Thank you. Provost, elected members and colleagues, today I bring before you a report of profound significance, one that asks us to reflect honestly on our past, to acknowledge the harm caused, and to take meaningful steps towards justice and reconciliation. The Tinker experiment refers to a series of policies implemented between the 1940s and the 1980s, aimed at forcibly assimilating Gypsy and Traveller communities across Scotland, including here in Perth and Kinross. These policies
now recognised as deeply discriminatory, were supported by successive governments, local authorities and other institutions. Their legacy is one of forced settlement, family separation, cultural suppression and enduring trauma. In Perth and Kinross, sites such as Bobbin Mill stand as reminders of this history. Families were settled in substandard accommodation, often against their wishes, and children were sometimes removed from their families and placed in institutional care. These actions caused lasting harm, psychological, social and economic, that continues to affect individuals and families to this day. And we must be clear, the role played by local authorities in supporting and implementing these policies was wrong. And on behalf of Perth and Kinross Council, I offer a formal and unreserved apology to the Gypsy and Traveller community for the suffering endured and the opportunities denied. We are deeply sorry for the pain caused by these actions and for the future to respect the rights, dignity and cultural identity of the Gypsy Travellers' families. But an apology alone is not enough. We are committed to taking action that gives meaning to our words. This includes working with Gypsy Traveller communities to create a permanent memorial at Bobbin Mill, ensuring their voices are central to how we remember and learn from this history. Auditing our archives to establish a full record of what happened and supporting community-led storytelling and cultural projects. Continuing to improve living conditions at Bobbin Mill and Double Dykes, with residents playing a central role in shaping the future of these sites. I want to reassure Bobbin Mill residents that the feedback provided during the consultation on the feasibility assessment will directly inform the actions we take going forward. I would also like to thank the residents of Bobbin Mill who are here today in the chambers for their ongoing engagement and willingness to work constructively with the Council. Expanding education and awareness so that the history and culture of Gypsy Traveller communities are understood and respected across our schools, services and wider society. And providing dedicated support and representation and ensuring that our policies and practices are continually reviewed to prevent discrimination and promote inclusion. We are already making progress, investing in site upgrades, supporting community engagement and funding a dedicated Gypsy Traveller officer. But we know that there is more to do, and we are committed to working in partnership to deliver lasting change. Let this apology mark not just a moment of reflection, but a renewed commitment to fairness, inclusion, and respect for all. By acknowledging past injustices, we can build trust, strengthen relationships, and ensure that such wrongs are never repeated. Colleagues, I commend this report and its recommendations to you, and I ask for your support as we take this important step forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Barrett, second, please.
Good morning, councillors. I want to thank the Leader of the Council for moving this report in the same way that it was right for the First Minister to make the apology to Scottish Gypsy Travellers for the wrongs of the Tinker experiments. I think it is entirely correct that the Leader of the Council offer this apology for the actions of Perth and Kinross Council's predecessor authorities. And as one former leader to another, I also want to thank Councillor Grant Lang, who recognised the need for Perth and Kinross Council last year to issue this apology when the Council was asked to do so, and when the First Minister in his speech to the Scottish Parliament expressed the hope that other bodies will listen with care to what was said in the Parliament that day and act accordingly, and also acknowledge the importance of addressing the wrongs that were inflicted upon the Gypsy Traveller community. The Scottish Government published reports and research that highlights the injustice and prejudice that Gypsy Traveller individuals, families and communities have faced as a result of the historical policies and decisions colloquially known as the Tinker experiments. Bobbin Mill is referred to specifically within that research, and the content summarised in the report today make for very disturbing and harrowing reading, revealing a shameful period in our post-war history. I want to recognise the commitment of Seamus and Rosanna McPhee, and Rosanna's here today, so thank you for being here to witness this, who have both demonstrated in seeking justice for Gypsy travellers, campaigning and pressing to ensure that the wrongs inflicted upon the community were not swept under the carpet but have been recognised and acknowledged by the Scottish Government, by a comprehensive and fulsome apology from the Church of Scotland, and today by the Council. Eric spoke about the actions that give meaning to our words and actions that go beyond our Gypsy Traveller Action Plan, and it is right that they should. I want to commend the commitment and dedication of our Equalities and Housing team for the work that they have done to improve the lives of Gypsy travellers in Perth and Kinross. But I've been to meetings with the Gypsy Traveller community where they felt the need to assert their human rights, and that the Council has failed to recognise their frustration for the failures and failings of the past, and is more concerned with starting afresh and drawing a line on those failures and moving on. So we need to put ourselves in the shoes, or try to put ourselves in the shoes of others and learn from their lived experience. And this apology marks a major milestone in demonstrating that change. But the first test of a renewed commitment to fairness, inclusion and respect for all, and a real demonstration of acknowledging past injustices, building trust and strengthening relationships, and ensuring that such wrongs are never repeated, will shortly come before this Council. And it will come in the shape of a planning application for a Gypsy Traveller transient site near the Food and Drink Park in North Muirton, and in the officer recommendations contained within that report, and ultimately with members' response in determining that planning application. Full account of the wrongs inflicted upon the Gypsy Traveller communities in Scotland and here in Perth need to be recognised and be seen to make a difference from this point onwards. I wholeheartedly join the Leader of the Council in saying that we are deeply sorry for the pain caused by these actions and for the failure to respect the rights, dignity and cultural identity of Gypsy Traveller families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I think it is important that we acknowledge the painful impact of these historical policies and the decisions which were taken by our predecessors in this chamber. The report highlights a number of difficult and uncomfortable truths for us. I think it's right that we should formally recognise that not only were these historical policies and decisions wrong, but they were also of a nature that still has lasting harmful consequences for many in the Gypsy Traveller community. It's right that we learn from the mistakes of the past and that we work towards a more equitable society for all. In that regard, I'm conscious that this Council is working closely with the Gypsy Traveller community and would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the work done by David McPhee and his team in this area. We have approved a £6.5 million transformation of the Double Dyke site, and I was recently involved in a consultation with the residents of Bobbin Mill, which is in my ward at Lochray, which is aimed at improving the living standards and accommodation there and not before time. I therefore welcome the paper and the apology before us today and support the recommendations of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Braun next.
Thank you, Provost. Societies do make mistakes. It is inevitable. But a just and fair society recognises those errors and makes amends to correct them. And more importantly, learns from them. We now live, I believe, in a society that would never again plan or condone such an experiment. We have learned by our mistakes of the past, and we are better for it. This experiment is now over and is now where it belongs, consigned to history. And I'd just like to add my thanks to Bree and Mrs. Ritchie for all the work they do to improve the lives of the gypsy travellers overall, and obviously particularly at Bobbin Mill. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braun. Councillor Lane next, please.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to thank the mover and the seconder for their heartfelt contributions. I think that we can all support. Following on from Councillor Forbes's question, I think we should be proud that we are the first local authority to be making this apology. And we shouldn't wait for others to do the right thing, and it's good that Perth and Kinross continue to lead moving forward. We only have to look at what's happening across the rest of the world, where this horrible way that humans treat each other is continuing. It's disgusting. Even the name, an experiment, to experiment with human beings and human lives is disgusting. I hope I speak for all of us when you feel the emotion about what we've done to people. Said enough.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I get the feel of what Councillor Lane was expressing there. I too feel the same. It's very hard to put into words comments here. It is reading this report, it's cringing. All relationships form and grow through respect. This community have not felt that. I hope today's belated apology will give the community a feeling that they are respected. We in this chamber have your back and will continue to work to show this. And I hope that our relationship with them will strengthen and grow, and respect will be shown. So, and equally, what Councillor Lane said there, I do hope that the other local authorities mentioned by Lane Ritchie do follow suit, because it would be right to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey McLaren. Councillor McEwen next, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much, Provost. We've had some very well spoken speeches, both presenting and supporting what we're saying here today. To give you of housing and social wellbeing, it's quite regular that I meet with officers regarding housing issues, both for tenants in the stone built houses, but also for our tenants who are part of the Gypsy Traveller community. Involved in those meetings, I always try to ensure that Councillor Peter Barrett is involved in this, because my experience in this council, he has always been their champion. He has always been their spokesperson at every turn, and I have always ensured to include him and his experience with this community. I also see that local councillors, both up in Pitlochry and down here in Perth, have regular interactions with the community and try their best and work as hard as they can to represent them and to ensure that the continued support that they need and that they demand is what we do as a council. My experience as the convener, I see an officer team who are wanting to do the best for this community through this paper, to recognise the abhorrent things that happened in the past, to not put them aside to history, but to learn and to appreciate that lived experience changes your perception of everything, and that we need to work closely with that to ensure that the outcomes for the Gypsy Traveller community is what they desire. Councillor Barrett also mentioned the transient site that we have passed through the Housing Committee but still needs to go through planning. I think my personal view on that is that we should pass that through planning. We need to support them in their historic use of sites within Perth and Kinross. I know that there are planning issues with that, but I think it's important that their views, their historic practices, their traditions are respected more than they have been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Councillor Massey next.
Thank you, Provost. As Deputy Leader and one of the 3 ward councillors for the Double Dykes Travellers site, I welcome this report and the formal apology it contains. The history set out in the report makes for uncomfortable reading, but it's also been necessary that we have been made aware of that history. The so-called Tinker experiment was not an abstract policy failure, it was a lived reality for a great many Gypsy traveller families in Perth and Kinross, marked by forced settlement, family separation and suppression of culture and identity. Today, this council acknowledges that local authorities were not passive observers, but active participants in policies that cause lasting harm. That acknowledgement matters. It says clearly to those affected that their experiences are believed, their suffering is recognised and their community's dignity is upheld. An apology, however, must be more than words. What gives this report credibility is a commitment to action to improving living conditions, preserving memory, supporting trauma-informed approaches and working in genuine partnership with Gypsy Travellers communities going forward. By recognising the reality of forced settlement, family separation and cultural suppression, the Council has taken a major step towards honesty, accountability and rebuilding trust. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But by being honest about our past and clear about our responsibilities in the present, this Council can begin to do so. I support this apology and I support the actions proposed. What will matter now is ensuring that the actions outlined are delivered in partnership with Gypsy Traveller communities so that dignity, respect and equality are upheld in practice as well in principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Councillor Liz Barrett next.
Thank you, Provost. As a member of the Church of Scotland, I am deeply ashamed of the role my church played in supporting the Tinker experiment, and I'd like to add my personal apology to the Gypsy Traveller community and especially to the local families, and thank you for coming here today. I affirm my commitment to and support for the actions in the report and the provision of the proper transient site and facilities in Perth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liz Barrett. Councillor Frampton next.
Thank you. I acknowledge from this report that this is a part of a painful and shameful part of our history. This experiment left deep scars that even today continue to affect the Gypsy Travellers community. It sought to suppress the culture, the vibrant cultural identities of a community, all in order to force them to conform to a narrow definition of societal norms. This caused harm and injustice, marginalising the Gypsy travelling community. The impact of this injustice has long-standing effects on that community throughout the generations. This left scars that have yet to heal. It is abhorrent that such pain and suffering was inflicted upon them from this very misguided experiment. Cultural identities are not just facets of our lives, they are the very essence of who we are. We failed in the past during this experiment to honour and respect the Gypsy Travellers' vibrant way of life. A failure not only of the community but also of the core values of compassion, fairness, equality and dignity that we hold dear as a society today. I am very pleased that today Perth and Kinross Council works effectively alongside our Gypsy Traveller community and recognises and supports their cultural identities. And I hope we ensure that injustice such as those in the past are never repeated. I hope that as we move forward together today, that these wounds of the past can be healed and we can continue to work towards a future where every cultural identity is celebrated and cherished. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frampton. Bailey Williamson next.
Thank you, Convener. I'd really like to thank everybody for their contributions, and I can pick up the emotion that's been generated in the room. This report has made for uncomfortable reading for all of us, and it really has. It's long overdue, and the effects still resonate even to this day. And it's important that we work to rebuild the trust and recognise the suspicions, and work even harder to overcome these suspicions from the community, and supporting this community in delivering a fair and honest society for everybody.
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. Councillor John Rebeck.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Provost. I don't know what's happening there with the technology. I just very briefly want to recognise Elaine Ritchie and Dave McPhee, who've been crucial on behalf of this council and the work that they do, but also to recognise the efforts of my ward councillor sitting next to me, Councillor Massey, and his contribution to the site at Double Dykes. He knows that he has my backing and indeed Councillor Mayor's backing in everything that he does without wanting to put words in Carol's mouth. However, I think in the main body of the report, and just to reflect, I think, at what Councillor Laing's emotions were, I think still today you see in the news reports from around the world of cruel and undemocratic authoritarian regimes persecuting minorities, and you're appalled by it. The fact that it happened in Scotland in our lifetime really is absolutely appalling, and it's quite right that we apologise for that. And indeed, as Councillor Barrett suggests, we need to make sure that that apology is not enough. We need to move forward from that and do the right thing wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. I don't see any other councillors wishing to comment on this item. I would just like to, in closing, thank again the McPhee family and the Stewart family for joining us here in the chamber to hear this apology. I think I'm very fortunate actually to personally know the McPhees, who are constituents of mine and are very hard campaigners and have campaigned for a long time. Unfortunately, have had to campaign for a long time to see justice for the Gypsy Traveller community, both at Bobbin Mill and across Scotland. I'm very sorry that it's taken this long for you to get an apology for this abhorrent experiment. It should never have happened in the first place, but the fact that it has taken this long to get a formal apology and some of the actions to support that is also wrong, and I hope that our ongoing actions will reflect our ongoing commitment to support the Gypsy Traveller community here in Perth and Kinross, and that we learn the wrongs from this chapter in our history. I would like to thank all of the members for their very heartfelt contributions. I think everyone can see the feeling in the chamber and that this is truly a heartfelt apology on behalf of a local authority, and therefore I would like to ask members, are we happy to agree the paper? Good. Thank you very much, members. We will now take a 10-minute comfort break and resume at 11:30. Good morning, members. Welcome back to today's full council. We now move on to item 7, which is the Armed Forces Covenant Progress Report. And I'm going to invite Elaine Ritchie, the Strategic Lead for Housing and Communities, to introduce the report.
Thanks, Provost. I'm pleased to present this comprehensive update on Perth and Kinross Council's commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant. Over the past year, the Council has continued to strengthen its support for veterans, serving personnel and their families, both through our statutory duties and voluntary initiatives. This report details our progress in key areas, including housing, education and employability, where the Council has a legal duty to consider the needs of the Armed Forces community, including veterans, under the Armed Forces Act 2021. We've maintained our Gold Award status in the Employee Recognition Scheme, reflecting our leadership in supporting the Armed Forces community. Our Armed Forces and Veterans Champion has played a pivotal role in engaging with local and national partners, sharing best practice and advocating for the needs of veterans across Perth and Kinross. The Council is also invested in practical support such as the Veterans First Guide, dedicated staff networks and ongoing training for frontline employees. Our commitment is further demonstrated by hosting events, securing dedicated funding and actively participating in civic and military events. Looking ahead, the report sets out proposals for continued partnership working with veterans, support organisations and council services, ensuring that Perth and Kinross remains a welcoming and supportive place for those who have served. Members are invited to note these achievements and endorse the priorities for the coming year as we strive to uphold the principles of the Armed Forces Covenant and maintain our reputation as a leading local authority in this important area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks for that introduction, Elaine. Can I draw your attention to section 5 of the report? And I just wonder if you could elaborate a bit on that with maybe some specific actions that are going to be taken.
Hi there. Thanks for the question, Councillor. This year's an important year ahead. We are due to be revalidated in terms of our gold award that we currently hold. It is reviewed and we want to make sure that we maintain that status going forward. So there will be a number of actions specifically coming out of that review, which started last week. There's an action plan currently with Council Services that meets the revalidation criteria, and we will see what actions required once that review has been completed by services. And obviously when we submit that revalidation, it will be shared through Bailey Ahern as well. Thank you.
Can I follow up, Provost?
Yes, you can.
Thanks for that. Are you able to give us a flavour as to what those actions might be?
As I said, I think it will really depend on what services come back, and council services come back and tell us they're currently doing. There's work we're looking at with our young people in terms of the cadet forces, which is part of the revalidation exercise as well. We have already provided some funding to Saints in the community, for example, to undertake a cadet force competition to try and raise awareness of the opportunities that the cadet forces offer in this area. We're working with our HR colleagues to look at the policies to see whether they're currently fit for purpose and currently meeting the needs of reservists should they be called up to serve, for example. It's just a couple of things I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share that action plan once it's fully completed. Thank you. The existing action plan is appendixed in the report, but as I said, the revalidation exercise will enhance that.
Okay. Thank you for elaborating, and let's hope no one's called up anytime soon, for goodness sake.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Forbes. Bailey next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I think this is a good follow-on. I appreciate Councillor Forbes asking about actions. I wanted to actually ask about outcomes. So this is an incredibly worthy cause, and it's great to see the ongoing support for veterans from those of all political colours and none on this council, and that it goes back over 10 years now. My question, as I say, is about outcomes. We're pledging here that veterans should be treated fairly, but then this report is only about activity and action. There's nothing much. There's scant detail on the outcomes and how we're actually affecting lives. How do officers therefore know that these actions are the right ones to ensure that we're actually delivering on the pledge and the covenant? Or is there maybe something coming in the future years on how we can monitor what the impact of all this good work is on the actual outcomes of veterans and their prospects in our area? Thank you.
Yes, good point. We can certainly reflect that in future reports. We probably just followed the template that we've provided previously, and which have been approved previously as an annual report. So we can certainly enhance that going forward. In terms of outcomes, we work obviously closely with our voluntary sector colleagues like SAFA, who are often at the, and this is no pun intended, at the front line of inquiries that they receive from members of the armed forces or veterans community in our local area. And I know Bailey Ahern himself, and indeed probably many elected members in this room will receive inquiries or direct inquiries directly to him, should they receive them from members of the veterans community. Myself and Bailey Ahern have met on a number of occasions with different individuals who may have particular issues that need signposted to the right support that they might need at that particular time in their lives. We also, and I think it's mentioned in the action plan, have a relationship with Seven Scots locally, and there is a firm base, a requirement to hold what's termed a firm-based partnership meeting. We're hoping to hold the next one in this room in the next month or so. Bailey Ahern's just checking his diary as we speak to see if that's going to take place then. But yes, so yeah, we can certainly enhance how we report that in future. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I've just got a quick question on an item on page 32, 3.8, regarding the council's housing responsibilities under the duty. And the second point down says homelessness, strategic and advice and provision of accommodation. My question just is, I'm aware that we do have a very high number of ex-service personnel living in Perth and Kinross, but I wonder, what is the level of veterans classified as homeless, if you have a way of doing that, and how does that compare across Scotland nationally? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mayor. We have a small percentage of armed forces presented as homeless, and it's normally due to crisis circumstances. We normally have a proactive approach, and that's where the strategic bit comes in, because we normally get notification and we do everything we can so that they've got accommodation on release or once they move into the area, because we get prior notification. But sometimes arrangements or family situations can deteriorate, and that is when we would pick them up through homelessness. And the numbers are small in comparison with other local authorities, so we're very proactive in that area.
Thank you. That was kind of what I thought the response was probably going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duff next.
Thank you. My question relates to the bottom of page 37 of the pack, which says about evaluating veterans information within Census 2022. And I just wondered, what information on veterans does the census gather, and what has it shown us in relation to Perth and Kinross? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The census, the last census was the first time that question was asked. We reported on it in last year's report specifically and broke it down, which is why I didn't include it again this year. I think I did possibly anticipate there was going to be a question around that, so I did look it up again this morning. We have 6,504 households in Perth and Kinross according to the census, which has a member or former member of the armed forces in it. 6,896 people in total. There is an age and gender breakdown as well. As I say, it was appendixed in last year's report. We can circulate that again or put it, make it more publicly available, I suppose, should people want to know that.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions, so I'm going to move to Bailey Ahern to move the report, please.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Councillor Drysdale for once again allowing me to introduce the Armed Forces Covenant paper. This report describes the work carried out in Perth and Kinross by everybody that works with or is connected to the military community in the Council to help fulfil its promise, as noted in the Armed Forces Covenant, which, as you will note in paragraph 3.3, was originally signed in 2012 and reaffirmed again in 2017. It also includes the work carried out by myself as the Armed Forces Champion. It's worth noting that there are two parts to the work carried out by us. The first is our commitment to the Covenant, and that covers the support in the Armed Forces community, be they serving, veterans, families or cadets. And the second is the work that's done in support of the ERS, which is the Employers Recognition Scheme, which we are current Gold Award holders. And this, as the name implies, is what we do as an organisation to support the staff that are connected to the Armed Forces community within Perth and Kinross Council. In section 4, you'll see the amount of frontline PKC staff that have completed e-learning modules that give an insight into the demands and needs of the armed forces communities and inform them in their role and how to help them. I was grateful a number of years ago that the council agreed to a budget of £5,000 a year to support the Armed Forces Champion, and I asked for this year for another £3,000 because of the events that were being held in to mark the end of the Second World War and VJ Day. It may not seem a lot, but it is used to buy the wreaths that you lay every year at Remembrance. I've also used it to support cadets, and most recently a small amount was used to support SAFA in helping families that are suffering from the cost of living crisis as they lost some small bit of funding to help, and I said that I would help them do that. As mentioned earlier, we're currently Gold Award holders of the Employment Recognition Scheme, and this year we will have to revalidate for another 5 years. And in possibly a bit of an answer to Councillor Bailey's question, the criteria this year is a lot stronger than it has been in the past, and there is more commitment towards the cadet force volunteers and the cadets itself, and we have to demonstrate what we do to help cadets. Several local authorities have actually failed and have dropped down to silver, and I do not want to see this local authority do the same. HR policies have been looked at and scrutinised a lot more in terms of what we do with the cadet volunteers and reservists that work within the council, and what happens with their reserve commitment that might be placed upon them should they have to deploy, and that's seeming every day more and more likely. We're one of the most active local authorities when it comes to supporting the military community. A number of years ago, I helped create the terms of reference for local authority armed forces champions, and that was scrutinised by the Scottish Government and then was issued to all 32 local authorities. Since then, I've had a couple of them contact me to help them understand their role, sometimes because they've had no experience to the military in their past. I attend the Scottish Government cross-party working group on armed forces, where we discuss at a national level what can be done to help support the armed forces community. I'm in contact with all the cadet organisations in Perth and Kinross, and have currently visited all the Sea Cadets and Air Cadets units in Perth and Kinross. And immediately after this meeting, hopefully it doesn't last too long, we'll be visiting the cadets at Glenalmond College. I'm particularly interested, with my community justice and safety partnership hat on, as well, what can be done to help veterans in the justice system. Most who have suffered from PTSD, which in some case can be part of the reason why they ended up in prison. Last year, I invited the Scottish Government Veterans Minister Graham Day up to Perth and Kinross, and we visited veterans in Castle Huntly, where there were some very frank discussions and a lot of information taken back by him to the Scottish Government. As is mentioned in the report, we've created a memorial garden in the prison, and less said about the work I did, and if you ever see it, the wonky leg is down to myself. And we attend the annual remembrance service, which is carried out in the chapel and in the Remembrance Garden. When I and others in this chamber were serving back in the 80s, we were still in the Cold War, and later on, the fall of the communism and the fall of the war changed the way that we looked at the Warsaw Pact and how we acted. However, nothing's really changed. Unfortunately, people are now serving today that will still endure ever-increasing conflicts and operations across the world, and are subject to operations that can end up with varying degrees of injury or varying degrees of mental health problems such as PTSD. This unfortunately will never stop, and we will see every day in the news we will continue to need to support our troops when they return home or leave the services. We must make sure that they continue to receive that support when they either with the NHS or the housing which we discussed earlier that suits their needs. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who works to support our armed forces community, the dedicated officers and all the services within the council, and all our partners that support our armed forces family for all the work they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey Ahern. Deputy Provost to second, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'm very pleased that Perth and Kinross Council chooses to be a council that is strongly supportive of the Armed Forces Covenant, and in word and deed does much to support the armed forces and ex-armed forces community in Perth and Kinross. I'm also very pleased that Perth and Kinross Council is recognised at the highest level of the Employer Recognition Scheme, and I hope that position is maintained following review in 2026. It is not that people in or previously in the armed forces should be put on a pedestal or considered ahead of others. It is just that the particular circumstances of employment in the armed forces should not disadvantage anyone while they are serving or after they have served. And I know from my own experience that the rules and regulations of civilian life as written sometimes can cause disadvantage, not intentionally, almost certainly, but more as a result of unintended consequences. In a world where the global situation is probably more dangerous, unstable and tense than I have ever known it, I am only glad that the past year has not seen the armed forces of the UK deployed on active service in any great numbers. But it is only by demonstrating, along with those who really are our allies, quality and competence in sufficient strength that we can continue to deter those who would do us ill. For the sake of those who serve now and for all of us more generally, I hope we can keep on doing that this year, next year and beyond. I am happy to second this paper and ask that Council can agree it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. First comment is from Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to take the opportunity to welcome this report, I think, which confirms the fantastic work which has been done to support our armed forces veterans and their families here in Perth and Kinross. I very much hope that we will retain our Gold Award in the forthcoming review, which I think is wholly merited. It certainly looks like we should in terms of the high level of engagement and activity which is ongoing throughout Perth and Kinross. Provost, can I just finish by acknowledging the work carried out by David McPhee and the team, and in particular my colleague Billy Chris Ahern, the Armed Forces and Veterans Champion, who, as you can hear and see, is extremely passionate about and committed to the subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun next, please.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to thank officers for their work and for what's been reported here in this paper, all that work with our veterans, but also to add my thanks to Deputy Provost Parrott and especially my colleague Bailey Chris Ahern for his work. This is also a time to thank all the men and women of our armed services and all of our veterans, some of whom are in this chamber, especially those who still suffer physical and mental health issues for their service. While the work and support reported here is to be recognised and commended, UK-wide, I believe there is more that could, should and must be done for our veterans and for their families who also suffer the effects of that service. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drysdale next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I would simply at this point wish to record my sincere thanks to David and his colleagues for the work that is done in this area. And I would also like to pay particular tribute to Bailey Ahern for looking at the Appendix 2 list of civic dates for the last 12 months. You really are putting in the hard yards in this area, Chris, and it's much appreciated. So I just wanted to record my thanks to everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane next, please.
Thanks, Provost. Yep, I just want to reiterate everything that everybody said already. I think if we look up the screen there, it says we want to have a Perth and Kinross where everyone can live life well, free from poverty and inequality. And this is showing the ethos of what we should be as a local authority. We're taking two totally different communities in the last two papers and showing that we're willing to support them, try and right wrongs and help them all through it. And I think that's what we should all be proud of, should be our ambition, is to look at every community and try and support them the best we can. And I think these last two papers show that we can do that, and we're living up to our motto. Hopefully when the protocol for buskers come, we can treat them the same way. So we'll wait and see when that comes out. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane. Councillor McCall next, please.
Thank you, Provost. And I just want to agree with others about the work that's been done here and commend the work of Bailey Ahern and the officers in supporting this. I have two comments to make. One is that I sincerely hope and would be unsurprised if we retained our gold status in terms of the employability aspect of this. In a previous life, have worked with many former members of the armed forces, both here in this country and overseas, and I can give first-hand testament to how valuable a contribution they make. I think if there's one comment I would make perhaps is that they often underestimate the transferable skills that they have. So I think that's something that's really important that we not only acknowledge here, but that we also help employers acknowledge. And perhaps, if we need to improve that transition from armed forces to civilian life. The only other, so I think that's an important thing to acknowledge and to continue working on with our local employers. The other comment I would make is there is an armed forces champion in NHS Tayside, and I noticed that in the paper there's comment on health matters. So I think, linking with the armed forces champion in Tayside and perhaps in the future bringing something that's forward that's perhaps more jointly and aligned if the next time we get a progress update would be really helpful to this council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCall. Bailey Ahern, do you wish to say anything in summing up?
I would just like to thank everyone for the comments. Yes, in terms of the NHS, I do speak to the Armed Forces Champion for NHS Tayside. But the comments you've made, not just to me, but to all the members that have served in this country and currently serve this country are well noted and thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey Ahern. I would just like to reiterate my thanks as Provost to Bailey Ahern and to the Deputy Provost, as well as all the veterans serving both on the council and within the council and across Perth and Kinross. As patron of SAFA, I'm very fortunate I get to hear firsthand about many of the life-changing stories that they are able to support along with Bailey Ahern and other partners, and it really is a testament to the council that we have the gold status, and I'm sure, much like Councillor McCall acknowledges, we are likely to retain that given our strong commitment to it and the dedication of Bailey Ahern and others. So thank you to all of those staff and Mr McPhee's team as well who support that work. Members, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you very much. And we now move on to item 8, which is the Equality Mainstreaming Report 2025-2029. And Elaine Ritchie, Strategic Lead for Housing and Communities, is going to introduce this report as well.
Thank you, Provost. I'm pleased to present the Equalities Mainstreaming Report 2025 to 2029 to full Council for formal approval. The statutory report sets out Perth and Kinross Council's ongoing commitment to advancing equality, fostering inclusion and celebrating diversity across all aspects of our work, as both as a service provider and an employer. The report outlines our legal responsibilities under the Equalities Act 2010, including the requirement to eliminate unlawful discrimination, advance equality of opportunity, and foster good relations in our communities. Our 17 equality outcomes detailed within the report have been designed to meet these duties and reflect our belief that equality is at the heart of what we do. Members will find that the report highlights the Council's strong track record of embedding equality principles and practices into the planning, delivery and monitoring of all services. Through collaborative working and partnership with our diverse communities, we will continue to ensure that Perth and Kinross is a safe and welcoming and accessible area for all. The report also includes case studies that illustrate the positive impact of our equalities work and demonstrates how our outcomes align with our strategic priorities. Minimal changes have been made to the previous Equality Mainstreaming Report and equality outcomes as they continue to accurately reflect the breadth and depth of work undertaken. Once formally approved, the report will be made available in accessible formats, including easy read and British Sign Language translations, with further translations available on request. Members are invited to improve the Equalities Mainstreaming Report and note the associated work highlighted within, reaffirming our shared commitment to equality, inclusion and the ongoing improvement of outcomes for all citizens and communities in Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs Ritchie. Councillor Mayer first, please.
Thank you, Provost. And Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie, for your excellent report there. I just had a wee question on the conclusion and the what you said about the easy read version and the BSL version of the reports, which would be made available. I'm wondering, will the easy read version be made available as a hard copy for people who don't have digital access? And would it be able to be printed out for those who don't have access to their own printers, etc.? And the BSL version, how will that be made available? I'm assuming that it's going to be on our YouTube channel or something like that, but will it also be available as a DVD rather than just streamed? Thank you.
We've done both before in terms of the current plan that was in place. So we're just repeating what was successful previously because the feedback was positive about that. The easy read version will be both online and can be made available as a printed version as well, particularly targeting people with learning disabilities using symbols formats within that. The British Sign Language is a film clip and approved with a signer highlighting what the outcomes are, and at the moment that's on the council's internet channels, but once it goes there it's beyond me from a technological viewpoint, but I will take advice on that as to where best it should be located. But at the moment we know people are able to access it from the British Sign Language and deaf community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions. And in which case I come to Leader of the Council to move the report. Oh, yes, Leader of the Council.
Thank you again, Provost, elected members and colleagues. I'm pleased to present the Equalities Mainstreaming Report for 2025-2029, which sets out our Council's ongoing commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion across Perth and Kinross. Our vision is clear. We want everyone in Perth and Kinross to live life well, free from poverty and inequality. This report is not just a statutory requirement, it is a reflection of our values and the progress we continue to make as a council and as a community. As a public authority, we are required under the Equality Act 2010 to publish this report and to demonstrate how we are eliminating discrimination, advancing equality and opportunity, and fostering good relations between all groups. I'm proud to say that Perth and Kinross Council has a strong and consistent track record in embedding equalities principles in everything we do, whether as a service provider or as an employer. Our 17 equality outcomes detailed in the report are designed to ensure that Perth and Kinross is a safe, welcoming and accessible area for all. We celebrate equality and diversity visibly, keep our communities informed and engaged, and work to increase awareness of equalities issues at every level. This report highlights the breadth of work undertaken by our teams and partners. It includes case studies that show the real impact of our efforts, from supporting vulnerable groups to promoting inclusive services and strengthening community relationships. And I want to extend my thanks to everyone involved in this work, but with particular appreciation to Councillor Peter Barrett for his dedication as Equalities Lead. Through collaboration across the organisation and with our communities, led by Peter, we are maximising resources and delivering higher quality services. This joined-up approach ensures our equality outcomes align with strategic priorities and deliver meaningful, lasting impact. The updated report has been publicly available online since April, pending formal approval here today. And once approved, we will produce accessible versions, including easy read and British Sign Language translations, with further translations available on request. Colleagues, I commend this report to you and ask for your approval so we can continue to build a Perth and Kinross where equality is truly at the heart of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. We now come to Councillor Peter Barrett to second the report, please.
Good afternoon, councillors. It is my privilege to second the Leader of the Council in bringing this Equalities Mainstreaming report to Council today. Equalities is in this Council's DNA. It defines this Council's character from the frontline service delivery to strategic direction, shaped by a staff with a steadfast moral compass and values of kindness, inclusivity and social justice. The dedicated public service ethos permeates our whole staff, not just in our equalities, housing, education and social services teams, but throughout the whole organisation, from those with hands-on responsibilities and roles, working with our communities and individual residents, through team leaders, managers, strategic leads and the executive leadership. And I want to thank them all for their service and leadership at a time when political norms and consensus globally and nationally that we have taken for granted for decades are under severe threat. We see on our streets people who want to spread fear and division and to scapegoat some of the most vulnerable members of our community and society. And I'm grateful that we still have a political consensus in this chamber and the enduring commitment that has stood behind it to embedding equalities, principles and actions into what we do as a council, because that's what makes us different. Eric has said some generous and nice things about my contribution, which I'm grateful for. Perhaps it's something of a rarity in this chamber, but joking aside, my job as Equalities Lead for this council would be immensely harder, if not impossible, without the endorsement and backing of all elected members. So I want to thank you all for that. I know, as Eric said, that the mainstreaming equalities report was published in April, and I don't really know why it's taken so long for it to come to the council. I appreciate that the last meeting had a heavy agenda, but that's still a 6 months lag between its publication and it's coming forward to council for formal approval. So I hope with the intervention of you, Provost, and the Head of Democratic and Governance, Legal and Governance Services, the next report can be brought forward much more timely. I don't need to tell you that there is a time and place for a robust political debate on what we disagree on, and we'll do plenty of that over the next 4 months and the year after that as well. But as long as we can put that aside and coalesce around a shared understanding of the fundamentals and a unity of purpose to do what is best for our community and not appease the loudest voices of self-interest, we will continue to make Perth and Kinross a more equal place where everyone can live life well, free from poverty, injustice and fear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall with first comment.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. My comment really is on Mr. McPhee mentioned that easy read versions can be made available, but I think actually I would ask officers to consider going further on that and being proactive in making sure that all of our care at home providers have access to that, and in fact are encouraged to share that with the people that they support. You mentioned people with learning disabilities, but there are often people with other types of sensory impairments as well. I noticed Councillor Frampton has asked about a Braille version. So I really do think if we really want to make sure that our equalities message and our activities that are excellent and are available and are known, importantly, by the people who perhaps would benefit most, that we be much more proactive in getting this information out there through all of the avenues and all of the channels that we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCall. Councillor Rebeck next.
Thank you, Provost. Just briefly want to add to what's been quite appropriately said already in this matter. I think before I became an elected member, equality meant the really obvious things to me, which was race, creed, religion, etc. But actually, years as an elected member has opened my eyes to the fact that inequality comes in a lot more shapes and forms than that. Too numerous to mention here, two or three that are close to my heart with my brief that I've got, of course, evolve around trauma, additional support need, adverse childhood experience, etc. But there are many, many more. I think this report does reflect the fact that inequality comes in many shapes and forms, and I think that's really important. It's a really good read, and it's appreciated to everybody that's been involved in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. I am not seeing any further requests for comment, and therefore I'm going to ask the Leader of the Council if he wishes to sum up. No? Okay. Members, are we happy then to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Members, we now move on to item 9, which is the Health and Social Care Financial Recovery Update. And we're going to just swap officers over here and allow Jackie Pepper, Director of Integrated Health and Social Care, Chief Officer, to introduce the report along with Scott Walker, the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you very much, Provost, and thanks for that time to reconfigure ourselves. This report updates Council on the work undertaken to scope Part B financial recovery actions within the Integration Joint Board's Financial Recovery Plan. It outlines our early assessment of impact, statutory implications and associated risks. The report also confirms the decision-making role of Council regarding measures that affect eligibility, access to social care and the Council's statutory duties. Previous reports have set out in detail about how demand for adult social care has increased significantly, with population changes driving complexity and volume of need. And our rural geography and growth in our older population creates specific service and cost pressures. The Council declared a health and social care emergency at its last meeting in December, and in recognition of the unsustainable position of increased demand and budget insufficiency. And since then, the Health and Social Care Partnership and officers within the partnership have continued to work very closely with both NHS Tayside and the Council through a strong and collaborative approach to managing the financial situation, and are extremely committed to the Council's budget review process and providing the relevant detail and professional advice and support as required. In this report, you'll see that the partnership has driven forward service redesign and transformation to deliver the IGB strategic plan. Our work is very much focused on shifting the balance of care towards prevention, addressing needs arising from a demographic change, and increasing equality of access and addressing unmet need in the community. And we shared the most recent performance report at the October Council meeting, which is showing how that is delivering over time, improving outcomes, and that's in the context of also delivering significant financial savings year on year, and within the context in which our expenditure is one of the lowest in Scotland per capita. Since my previous report to Council on the 29th of October, the IGB met on the 17th of December and received a financial update that indicated that the financial recovery measures in year to reduce costs set out in Part A of the IGB's recovery plan were proving to be successful and on track to be delivered in full by the end of the financial year.
The actions under Part B of the Financial Recovery Plan were proposed as possible options to manage within available resources and deliver a balanced budget. And each of these actions were acknowledged to result in a reduction in the level of service that's likely to be provided by further limiting who can access services, scaling back a wide range of care and support, and some of the health and social care partnerships planning and oversight activity. We have sought legal advice regarding the demarcation of roles and responsibilities, and that's outlined in this report, and indicates that due to the Council's statutory duties, the proposed Part B options should be properly considered as part of the Council's revenue budget setting discussions, and with the initial scoping and high-level impact assessments informing those discussions. So although the actions in Part B were initially considered as part of the 25-26 recovery plan, it is now recommended that these are considered as and form part of the budget setting processes for 26-27 onwards. Thank you, Provost. I'm happy to take questions, and we also have senior officers from the Health and Social Care Partnership here to assist. But I'm going to hand over to Mr. Scott Walker, who'll give a brief position in relation to the Scottish budget. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity just to give a brief statement on what we know about the Scottish budget so far. So just for awareness, it was published yesterday around about 3 o'clock. Despite earlier suggestions that we may receive a multi-year settlement, the circular that was published yesterday was for 1 year only. At 2 minutes to 5 last night, we received the local government finance circular. Whilst this contained headline figures on an individual council basis, we're still working through the full set of reconciliations that explain what is and is not included in the 26-27 settlement. There are also several revenue and capital funding streams that have still to be allocated. On the face of it, there is an increase in the level of funding to the council. However, we had already assumed much of this increase as the Scottish Government's contribution to the National Pay Awards and other commitments. Right now, I am not in a position to advise on the actual impact on the council of yesterday's announcements. I hope to be able to provide more of an insight to members in the briefings we have scheduled in the next few days. However, one thing is clear at this point. No specific additional funding has been provided to meet the increasing demand and need for social care services, which we've already fed back at sessions this morning. The circular also includes information on the 3 non-domestic rate poundages, all of which are due to reduce in 26-27, as well as various reliefs. The Cabinet Secretary for France and Local Government wrote to COSLA yesterday confirming that councils will have full discretion over decisions on council tax with no freeze or cap. And finally, COSLA have produced their annual budget reality document, which I will ensure will be shared with you later on today. I do apologise for the lack of detail, but I hope you do understand why, and I do aim to provide as much more information with you in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First question, Baillie Ahern.
Thank you very much, Provost, and thank you for the report. My question is regards to paragraph 5.7 on page 72 and the recovery actions. The first recovery action there, the middle paragraph talks about the data analysis estimated 93% of individuals provided care were assessed as substantial and critical. Can we get an idea of the numbers we're talking about there? Because the next line says Perth and Kinross Council no longer provides support for people presenting with low level need. What is classed as low level need, and what sort of numbers are we talking about? And what support have they got now they're not getting that support from Perth and Kinross Council? And then it's just a statement afterwards goes, those with moderate need account for only £50,000 of the total expenditure. What's happening to them? And is that 50,000 changing or whatever? It's just a statement there going moderate need is 50,000, but it doesn't explain what's changing or if anything's changing for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baillie Ahern. Very happy to answer that question. We have not changed the eligibility criteria, and I think it's very important to say that that nothing has changed since we've begun to look at this. It would require a whole series of consultations and equality impact assessments before we would be able to move to that. The data that's here in this report relates to a piece of work that was carried out looking at all our social work assessments between April and November 25. And it relates to over 4,000 assessments. It's something like 4,100. It's over 4,100. And what we do know is that of that, the 93% of the 4,000 relate to outcomes that would determine someone be requiring or having substantial or critical need. So 8% is quite a low number of that, but it's still quite significant in terms of moderate need. I can't work out 8% of 4,000. I'll maybe ask my finance colleagues when I calculate. Sorry, it's about 320 people. But what we do know in terms of those individuals are that the level of support that they require means that it's actually being provided in a way to prevent them, entering crisis and requiring a higher level of support. For those at a lower level, we would be signposting people to support through third sector and our commissioned services to receive support, but rather than through the services that we deliver ourselves. So that's the way in which we would manage that. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does to a point, and I was afraid you were going to say the third sector. So although they're not high numbers, it's now putting an increasing burden on the third sector, which, yes, as a local authority, we don't receive the funding, but equally the third sector don't get the funding either.
And I think that's a really important point to raise, because the fifth action in here relates to the potential to reduce the level of and extent of the contracts that we have. So that's why we need to look at this in the round rather than in the individual options. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes next.
Thanks, Provost. Jackie, thank you for this comprehensive paper. And can I just say, I'm sorry you've chosen to retire, but I wish you well, and I hope you have a long and happy retirement. My question is on rurality. It's mentioned at 3.8, but in other places as well. And I know that our funding from the Scottish Government doesn't include rurality in some areas, for example, home to school transport, but I'm wondering if our funding is weighted towards the rurality nature of our authority.
Presently, there's no weighting towards rurality. So in terms of the funding for adult social care, I don't know, and I'm seeing that's confirmed by both the Chief Finance Officers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Jackie. And I know it's a difficult situation we're in, but I'm wondering how we got here and how we prevent getting here. And it's the word unprecedented means that we didn't have a clue this was happening. It says unprecedented demographic and population changes. I've been in the council too long, but right from the start, we knew that the population was going elderly. So we've known that for quite a few years. I'm then looking at the table, and if I'm misunderstanding it, it's showing a steady growth from I think, and it says 3.7 times increase, but 100 to 270 to me I thought would be a 2.7 increase, but maybe my maths is wrong. But it works out 10% a year, and if you look at that table, it looks like, so I wouldn't have thought, if I'm interpreting the table correctly, it's unprecedented. It is something that we haven't planned for as a local authority, we haven't planned for as elected members, and we've not funded a 10% increase all the time. So I don't think it's unprecedented. I think it was foreseeable. And if I can continue my question about in 3.8, where we're saying we're going to have to investigate why the costs in rural areas are higher, and we're going to look at that. We knew that back in 2014 when I spoke to John Gilruth, and we did away with our in-service and put it out to the private market. It was that the costs for rural provision was much higher than that. So I don't know why this is a shock and we're looking at that as in the recovery plan. So that's just the start of my questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ling. I think there's two aspects to your questions. The first bit was around whether this was foreseeable. And I think there are a couple of things that we've been looking at in that. Yes, you can see the demographic change, but I think as we've reported earlier on in the year, there has been a significant change in that from the National Registers for Scotland's data. So that's projecting a higher level and sharper level of increase, particularly around our older population. But in terms of the complexity of need, when we're looking at in some of the individual cases that we're supporting at the moment, we're experiencing people coming with much higher levels of need and much greater complexity than we've experienced before, and that we have not been able to predict. So that's what we're referencing here.
Thanks. But the table there, am I interpreting it wrongly then? Because the table shows it's a combination of need and age and everything, and that seems to be going over 27 years. It seems to be a year-on-year average climb. It's not like there's a massive spike at the end or 2 years from the end. So I understand that the complexity is going up, but this table doesn't show it. So we could be looking to do that. And the other point was about why we're looking at why things are, more expensive in rural provision, when to me, living as a rural person is completely obvious, because we don't have the logistics set up in a good format.
I'll address your second question, and I may ask for others to comment on the graph. I think Zoe or Chris would like to come in on that. Your second question was around rurality and costs and investigating that. So we do know that, and we do have some data, but we want to look at that in a bit more detail. We also want to do that in collaboration with our colleagues nationally, and to see what they're experiencing, because when you look at some of the data around and our family group and how we're comparing, we need to be working much more closely with areas such as Scottish Borders, Argyll and Button, Dumfries and Galloway, and understanding what that actually means, and entering into the national discussions about the what's required to meet the additional costs associated with that, given that we're not supported financially at a national level for rurality.
Hello. That particular chart came from the NRS data, and the bit about it that's unprecedented, particularly for us, is the over 85 data. That's where we've seen that really significant jump. So the over 75 was, we could see that was predicted and that was coming, but the over 85 and then the complexity and acuity associated with the over 85 age group is the bit where we've really seen the increase in cost and demand within Perth and Kinross, and that's the bit that's been the unexpected bit for us. And of course, we know that delivering services in rural areas is highly, highly challenging, but the increase in complexity and acuity, and then the lowering under 65 age range, which is the dependency ratio that chart is based on, is what we need to explore more and what we need to understand better as we're moving forward. So that chart is based on the dependency ratio and the over 85 age group, and that's where you see that service demand increase coming from.
Okay, thank you. Bailey next.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. There's been a lot of discussion about the growth in demand, or the change in demand having come from population growth, but I just want to ask a question about another change that's happened that isn't talked about so much in the paper today. So at 3.4, we're told that growth is driven by, in fact, 3 factors that are all dependent on related to the old age population growing, and I don't deny that. That's obviously a big factor. But the other significant change over that period from 2001 until the current time is the introduction of care at home, the reduction in council-run care homes in our area, and much more involvement of the private and third sector organisations. So my question is, do we have evidence to confirm that the expected savings were achieved from moving to those models of delivery, particularly in a rural area like ours? can anyone confirm that we would be in an even worse situation had those shifts not happened? And I suppose the broader question is, has any academic work been done on this question? It was the recommendation of academics that we move to the models like care at home and that we move to more private and third sector involvement. But has anyone been funded that we know of in our academic institutions to look back and make sure they were the right decisions, particularly for rural areas like ours? Or is it worth us having some of those things back on the cards now we face this point of crisis? Thank you.
I think I think you ask a really important question there, but what we do know is that it's important to get the balance correct in terms of the delivery of services, whether that's been provided internally and providing a flexibility to meet changes in demand. But your question around the academic research around that, we can go away and have a look at that and come back, because there may be research, particularly around from the King's Fund, may have some research, but it may not have been carried out in Scotland. But we can bring that back and provide that level of detail to you. We know that from, I think, over the last 12 months to 18 months, our ability to commission from the private sector, particularly around, or the independent sector, particularly around care at home, our relationships are very strong there, and they have been responsive in a way that's been supporting our direction of travel. And in some cases, I would suggest that is a more cost-effective solution than providing that ourselves. So we do have to look at that and get the balance right.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more on this.
Thank you. Councillor Braun next, please.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Jackie, for the paper. I'm looking at section 3.9, and the last sentence says this is highly likely to mean limiting who can access services, reductions in the level of care and support. So my question is, should anybody be concerned at the moment who gets support or care at whatever level? Should they be concerned that this might be withdrawn or reduced in some way?
I think one of the things that we would need to give reassurance of is if there were any changes in the way in which provision was delivered, the criteria and access for that. If there were any changes, we would have to be preserving support for those people who are receiving that, and that would be a legal requirement, I think, certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Duff next.
Thank you, Provost. Given the issues and concerns which are set out in this paper, and that we as a local authority are by no means alone in this, I think it's extremely disappointing that there appears to be no additional funds for social care in yesterday's Scottish budget. But what makes this situation even more alarming is the proposed changes to the grant-aided expenditure allocation methodology for adult social care, which will negatively impact on Perth and Kinross. And I wonder if you're able to update the Council on the potential implications of these GAE changes. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So we did, with the information that we got yesterday, we got the updated GAE indicators. We did a bit of lobbying through COSLA in terms of the floor and how that might help us to deal with this issue. It's been confirmed that the floor adjustment has been increased, so that has given us a level of protection more than we would have been otherwise been offered. It's also been raised at a couple of briefing sessions this morning about whether we can go further in terms of special transitional relief was talked about this morning. Those discussions are ongoing, but I understand they are extremely problematic, and there are a number of unintended consequences which I don't understand that would make them more difficult to bring in. So we're in a better position than we were before Christmas.
Or a least worse position, I think, is possibly the better way of putting it. And if you don't understand, Scott, I'm sure there's no chance of this side of the chamber understanding them at this point in time. But thanks, I'll look forward to hearing more about that in future.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson next.
Thank you, Provost. We've seen this iceberg coming toward us for quite some time, And we agreed under 4.9 to write to the Scottish Government and arrange a meeting with the First Minister and the Minister for Health and Social Care to highlight the issues that we and other councillors are having. What was there absolutely no outcome from that meeting? Was it we just told to get lost, or given the result from yesterday's budget, it appears that nothing's actually happened. I know we'll raise millions from the private jet tax. I'm sure that will cover the shortfall, but I'm just wanting to know if you were given any assurances at all as part of these discussions that the Scottish Government are taking this matter seriously. Thank you.
Does the Leader of the Council wish to comment on that?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you to Councillor Robertson for his question. And if I can clarify that I did meet with the First Minister for over an hour just before Christmas. I have been involved in meetings with the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care shortly thereafter. And I can confirm that the representations that I said I would make, I did make. Whilst I can't pretend to understand the complexities of the circular, that if Scott can't understand it, I've got no chance. But I do detect that. In fact, I don't detect. I understand from some of the comments made in the Holyrood Chamber yesterday, and in correspondence that I've seen since, that there is an absolute intention, as I understand it, for dialogue in what Scott has explained is a complex area, for that dialogue to continue at pace now. Where that leads to, I cannot say, but as I'll say in my closing remarks after questions, this starts tomorrow, and there is a further meeting tomorrow that I shall attend.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Collins, you're next, please.
Thanks, Provost. Councillor Duff, I notice stole Councillor Forbes's next question, and he actually stole mine as well. But I do have something else I would like to ask about. I was desperately trying to find the paragraph again where I read it, but there was something about identifying the causes of these increases in volume and complexity of need, and putting in place preventive measures. I just wondered whether it would be helpful if we got an idea of the capacity within the Health and Social Care Partnership to put in place preventive measures, or to do the transformation in terms of working practices, ways of working, and so on, that would be needed to accommodate the level of savings that would be required if there's no transitional relief or changes to the GE, further changes to the proposed grant-aided expenditure mechanism and the methodology behind that. Yes, what's the capacity within the Health and Social Care Partnership to do either the transformation work or the preventive work?
In terms of that, your question, Councillor Stewart, I think in order to be able to carry that out, I think we would be requiring additional capacity to support us to do it. But I think in terms of the discussions that we need to take forward into the budget setting process, I think we need to be realistic about how much we can transform to address the level of the budget deficit that we have. I think there's work to be done. There's always work to be done in terms of improvement and preventative work. But the level of need and the complexity of demand that we're experiencing is high, and the level of budget insufficiency is not going to be met through those measures. But we can assess that, and we can bring that detail forward.
Thanks, Chief Officer. I thought it would just be helpful to bring that point out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mayor next, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Provost. On section 7, the conclusions, clearly the final conclusions can't be reached until we've got full knowledge of the financial information which Scott Walker is still interpreting. However, at point 7.4, there's a very stark warning that if the council have to provide additional funding to meet the level of demand in adult social care, there will be a requirement to make cuts across other areas of council services. We are currently in a consultation with the public about the budget, and what I'd like to know is if we have to make cuts due to the fact that we are being restrained from raising the level of council tax to the level which we have already been told would be necessary in order to avoid cuts, will the public be informed that that is a major reason why they are seeing services being scrapped or reduced, in that the council did not accept the recommendation which was made to us by the financial officer at our last full council meeting? Thank you.
So what I'll do in terms of the report I bring to council in March, on March 4th, when we set the final budgets, is I will set out the implications of the council decision back in December, and that will have a financial cost against it. As officers, we will obviously bring proposals to balance that budget, and we will make it quite clear that that's our statutory responsibility to do so, and that may cut across, I think, some of the issues you've just raised, Councillor Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Lane, you have a point of clarification.
A clarification on how the budget setting works. It's was set, I think, at 7.5% this year as the working assumption for officers to work to. It hasn't set it at 7.5. That's a working assumption. The decision will be made by the council groups on the date. So I think it's premature to go and tell the public that you're cutting something because of a decision that was taken as a working assumption.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett next, please.
Thanks, Provost. And before I ask my questions, I'd maybe try and give or offer some sort of response to Councillor Robertson's questions, because I met Shona Robson last week with COSLA group leaders, and it was me that put the case for additional funding for in health and social care funding. So I've clearly done a first-class job there. Because we asked for £750 million and we've got precisely nothing. So that is a source of anger and pain to me, particularly because Shona Robson did acknowledge the scale of the finances required to support social care, and the overspend in social care of 500 million. And I broke down the 750 million into that. 500 million overspent already by Scottish councils this year, additional money that they've had to find and put into that to fill that gap. There was 175 million, which was only to cover the increase that we'll experience in terms of the real living wage, and that left 75 million pounds across the whole of Scotland for the additional demand and additional complexity of demand. And because of figures that Scott gave me before I went into the meeting, I was able to point to our £4 million overspend and our minimum £13 million pressures that we're facing in social care next year. So 75 million, it wasn't going to touch the level of demands that Scottish councils face. And the response that I took from that meeting was, you know, we're not going to give you 750 million, but there will certainly be something there. And, you know, Scott referenced the budget reality document. If you look at that, there's only £234.9 million unallocated additional spend for Scottish local authorities. So even if councils applied all of that to health and social care, it's only a third of what we actually need. So, you know, I'll come maybe back to this in my speech, but I'll try and get to the question now. But no, we've been turned down flat, and we've had a really, you know, tone-deaf response and a deaf ear, and that can't go on. Scott was pretty clear when he said that there was no announcement of a specific increase for specific funding for social care. The budget headlines seem to indicate that there was a 0.7% increase for social care across Scotland. But, you know, from I've heard and looking at what the you know, financial institutions and experts are saying, as well as what the sector is saying, is that 0.7% was already monies that were announced, £100 million for social care last year. So, you know, are we absolutely clear that there is no additional funding for social care?
So there's a couple of things I would like to add there. I've got a couple of documents here. One is the local government finance settlement. And within that, there are a number of bullet points as to where or what's included in the settlement. Now, in that, the second bullet point states additional general revenue grant of £253.9 million to support local priorities. Full stop. I've got a letter that was sent to COSLA yesterday that goes on slightly further to say, sorry, apologies, to support other local priorities, comma, including adult social care. But that's alongside all of the other pressures we've got. That's the only part that I can see in the paperwork I've received to date around about social care. So you need to put that alongside all of the other pressures that the council is facing. I think Jackie wants to come in as well.
I think what's relevant to your question, Councillor Barrett, is the we have benefited from support through that comes through NHS under the operational improvement plan, but that's specifically targeted at delayed discharge without delay and complex care. But that was non-recurring funding last year. So my understanding that some of the money that you're describing there will be a continuation of that, but that will allow us to continue to support the NHS in terms of the flow through the system, which we already are using to support social care. So it's not additionality; it's already supporting the whole operational improvement through NHS.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Lane.
I'll let Councillor Rebick go because it's actually my second question related.
Councillor Rebick then.
Thanks very much, Provost. It's just a quick question, just from my understanding. Yesterday wasn't the Scottish budget, I don't think. It was the first reading of the Scottish budget. Is that correct?
Yes, there are three readings. Yesterday was the first announcement. The circular is based on that. There may be changes, but there may not be.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
Thanks. Bring it back into what we actually can handle at the moment. Jackie, I think for elected members, what we'd be looking from the IGB and everybody in it is a figure that we actually need as we're setting our budget, rather than, you know, a low estimate and then coming back, because it happens with, you know, with the best will in the world, it tried to be kept down, couldn't, and we don't like surprises. So are we going to get a figure sometime soon of an estimate of what we will need to increase the funding for to include in our budget setting? That's the first one. Also, as part of the recovery plan, are we looking at contracts? I'll give you just a quick example. The 18th, I stayed at home for somebody to come to check my mother's hoist and bed. First guy came out, only did one of them, drove from Dundee to service it. And I said, can you not do both? He says, oh, I can do them both, but Perth and Kinross have separate contracts. So in the afternoon, another guy from Dundee came to the same house out in Spillfield to check the hoist. One did the bed, one did the hoist. Two people travelling. Said, why is that? He said, Angus and Dundee are separate. We've got the contract for doing all the equipment. We can do it all, but we're doing. So it's things like that end users may be able to see over a whole contract thing. So I was wondering, do you speak to people, the end users and other people, to try and help? And the biggest concern for me is if only 3 out of 10 people are happy to continue and feel they can continue to care for their loved ones, and 7 out of 10 feel that the current situation they can't continue, that's going to be another massive hit to the budget. And what are we doing to address that? And I know it's across Scotland, not just Perth and Kinross, because I was at your briefing.
Okay, so if I could just turn to the first part of that question. We've shared information with all budget review groups. There's a presentation will be shared with all members involved in the budget process later today. That sets out a range of up to, under the mid-level scenario, of about net £12 million. That's very volatile. There's changes this week, I think, to the National Care Home contract, which could impact on that. We've had a discussion internally about whether we should actually be going to the higher level. As I think you're intimate, we had that discussion last week. But there are consequences of that. That means we need to find further cuts in other council services. I understand there's an IGP development session on Friday, where I think there'll be a lot more detail on that. And following that, we'll be able to get that back into the BRG process with elected members.
Thank you very much, Scott. And I think, as I said in the introduction, our commitment to supporting the budget setting process, providing all of the relevant detail, is absolutely there, and that's something that we're totally committed to. You raised a number of questions in relation to contracts, so thanks for raising that, and that we'll take that away and have a look at that. But it's certainly something that I know that across our contracts we monitor complaints and compliments, and we see that on a monthly basis. And your last point was about unpaid carers, and I think in terms of the support that we provide for unpaid carers goes beyond the funding that we actually receive, and we prioritise that by a significant amount, and that's something that we're absolutely committed to continuing. So we would not be wanting to see that reduce at all, because when you actually work out what that means in terms of the financial benefit to our community, it's enormous. So we would not be wanting to see that reduce, perhaps become more effective, but not reduce.
Okay, thank you very much. Finally, the Chief Executive would like to provide a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Just to follow up on some of the comments from Jackie and from Scott. This matter was discussed this morning at 8:30 when all Chief Executives from across Scotland were invited to meet with Scottish Government. The single issue that was at the front of that meeting was the funding for social care across Scotland. I think every Chief Executive who commented in the meeting highlighted the pressures that we were all facing in social care funding across the country. So it's just to offer a degree of reassurance that whilst we have our own version of this, this is not unique to Perth and Kinross, and every part of Scotland has a version of this. The rurality and the demographic conditions that we have in Perth and Kinross are particular pressures, and the GAE implications do increase the pressures by about £4 million in the upcoming year. But at this point in time, this issue has been highlighted by every Chief Executive across Scotland in our conversations with government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leader of the Council, to move the report, please.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, colleagues, for your very appropriate and needed questions and the clarity we all hope to receive before too long to help us understand this complex area. This update report ensures that Council is fully appraised of the financial impact of significant and unprecedented demographic and population changes in Perth and Kinross ahead of our ahead of the budget setting process for 26-27. There has been a substantial increase in both the complexity and volume of social care needs, particularly among older people and those with learning or physical disabilities, and demand is exceeding available funding substantially. This council is engaged in urgent, coordinated action to safeguard the well-being of our communities and ensure equitable access to social care, and deliver on our vision and priority to protect and care for our most vulnerable people. We are acutely aware of how our rurality and relative higher growth in our older population creates specific service and cost pressures. We recognise that the IJB has made use of reserves and significant savings over the last few years to address this, and has been required to introduce financial recovery measures within the last 2 years. The actions under Part B of the IJB's financial recovery plan were proposed as possible options to manage the delivery of its strategic plan within available resources. This report sets out that it is necessary for the Council, given its statutory duties, to agree the extent to which it is willing to progress each of the 5 actions. The financial pressures in social care and the proposals for managing this will be considered in detail as part of the Council's revenue budget setting discussions and require approval of this Council. I would just like to add and to update Council, as alluded to earlier, that in addition to my previous representations to and meetings with the First Minister and Cabinet Secretaries, I have also today written to the President and CEO of COSLA, requesting that a report be brought as soon as possible to COSLA leaders. Building on previous discussions, now that the additional information on grant-aided expenditure is available and the financial circular for the 26-27 Scottish Budget has been published. Specifically, I have requested that the report sets out the distributional impact across councils and highlights those areas most adversely affected, including local authorities with rapidly ageing populations and rural service patterns, and the implications of these 2 things on demand, workforce and costs over the medium term. I have strongly urged recognition by COSLA of the differential costs for care at home provision in rural settings and how these may compound the impact of indicator changes. I hope that COSLA will continue to engage with the Scottish Government on behalf of all local authorities on funding and sustainability. My intentions here are entirely collegiate. The pressures are national, and we need to work together to resolve the massive challenge that is continuing to deliver vital social care and health services for all our residents across this vast local authority area. There is, as I also alluded to earlier, there is a special COSLA leaders meeting tomorrow, and colleagues, you may be assured that I will continue my efforts to ensure that ongoing dialogue, as I think is intended, and I believe is intended, the ongoing dialogue is proceeded with at pace, with the urgency it deserves. And I hope to have further feedback after COSLA leaders that I would wish to share with elected members as much as possible. In the meantime, colleagues, I'm happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall, the second, please.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, from my involvement with the Integrated Joint Board of the Health and Social Care Partnership, I can give testament to colleagues that the financial position regarding health and social care provision in Perth and Kinross is kept under regular scrutiny and review. In terms of financial and operational efficiency, Perth and Kinross performs very well compared to other mainland local authorities, ranking 29th lowest out of 32 across Scotland. But this excellent performance also means that as a high level of operational and financial efficiency is already being achieved, there is limited opportunity to improve on this position substantially, or substantially enough to meet the financial challenges facing us. Although there is always room for improvement. And as a former procurement professional, I agree with Councillor Lane's comments on contracts review and contracts management. And I'm sure that those of us who support family members who are in receipt of social work services can identify further opportunities for efficiencies. Every little helps, to paraphrase. From previous representations to this council, we all know that there are ongoing significant challenges and unforeseen increases in demand that have impacted the current year position. New information on current and forecast demographic trends, plus the rurality of Perth and Kinross geography, adds further complexity to our service delivery model. I acknowledge the work that has been done to address the projected budget gap in current year, the promptness in bringing this matter to this council, and the council's response and support. I also acknowledge the ongoing Part B work to address the financial challenges in the next and following financial years. Colleagues, as a council, we have a responsibility, in my opinion, to ensure that there is fair and equal support to all of our citizens, particularly those who are among the most vulnerable in our communities. As part of our budget setting process, there will be choices to be made on how we deliver health and social care services going forward. I am confident that each of us will want to ensure that our most vulnerable citizens and those and their family members who support them continue to be provided for. The report before us today is clear on the work that has been carried out to date, the challenges facing us all, and the ongoing work being undertaken to address budget challenges next year and beyond. And I commend the recommendations in this report to Council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. First comment, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. The report makes some pretty grim reading. I thank the officers for their efforts to address the financial challenges which we are facing. It sets out the scale and the reasons for the financial crisis in these services in Perth and Kinross and elsewhere in Scotland. Paragraph 3.3 highlights that in the last quarter of a century, the level of demand has risen by nearly 4 times the level of 2001, principally driven by considerable increases in our elderly population. This is exacerbated by the additional costs of providing care at home in rural settings, estimated at an additional 9% over the same service in an urban setting. This is exactly the reason which caused this council to rightly declare a health and social care emergency in Perth and Kinross last month. Which makes the situation all the more concerning is the absence of additional Scottish Government funding next year for social care and the potential consequences of proposed changes to the grant-aided expenditure methodology. This will significantly disadvantage us further with an anticipated cut in the region of £4 million to this local authority's social care funding. This would be a totally unacceptable outcome for the people of Perth and Kinross, and if this comes to pass, I would call on this council and carers and the elderly throughout Perth and Kinross to make their feelings known in this regard. Provost, what I think makes such an outcome even more galling is that Perth and Kinross has one of the lowest care costs per head of population in Scotland, demonstrating the high levels of efficiency and effectiveness with which its existing funds are being managed. Perhaps the Scottish Government should be looking for increased efficiency and effectiveness elsewhere before cutting the GAE budget of those local authorities which are doing a good job in difficult circumstances. Can I finish by thanking the Leader of the Council and Councillor Barrett for their efforts on behalf of Perth and Kinross with colleagues in the Scottish Government and at COSLA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to echo some of the comments that have been made by Councillor John Duff and the leader of the council. I think the report sets out in pretty stark terms the catastrophic impact that there would be if we were to pursue the Part B savings, and I did try to convey that to the Finance Secretary, but clearly those pleas fell on deaf ears. I hear what the Chief Executive says in terms of the response from Chief Executives, and I'm grateful that that signal has been sent clearly. But as Eric says, we have the meeting of causeless council leaders tomorrow, and far too often when it's come to budget negotiations, SNP council leaders have caved in. They haven't had the guts to challenge the Scottish Government, regardless of the impact that it would have on them locally. And I appreciate all of Eric's sterling efforts to engage with the Cabinet Secretary and the First Minister. But yet again, despite being in full possession of all the facts, they've turned us down completely. So that can't be allowed to stand. And we've also got the added problem with the Scottish Labour Party's frankly farcical position in terms of abstaining on the budget. Are they just going to let this pass as well? So Alistair, if you're listening, then I think you need to speak to your colleagues who, despite decrying this as a catastrophic or a terrible settlement for local government, still don't seem to have the guts to oppose it when it comes when push comes to shove. As John Duff says, there are several weeks in which we can try and attempt to rectify and rescue this situation, but it will require strong political will. It will require people to stand up and be counted, and not just meekly accept that because we've got an election coming up in May that we can't rock the boat. We need to rock the boat, or we are £17 million out of pocket, and people's care and other services in Perth and Kinross will be catastrophically impacted by that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robertson next.
Thank you, Provost. I'm also thankful for the efforts of my colleague Councillor Barrett and the leader of the council in trying to get the Scottish Government to address the dreadful situation we're in. And I truly appreciate the efforts of our Jackie Pepper and all her staff in trying to address that. It must be very, very difficult to try and shuffle the figures to make it add up, but they won't. Reading the report, it's quite clear that we've done almost everything we can to try and cut costs and become as efficient as possible. And you heard from what Councillor Duff said about where we stand in the efficiency tables. Reading the report, I have to say, I think this highlights the outcome of many of the choices the Scottish Government have made over the last few years. They actually boast that in Scotland nearly everything we need we get for free, and I for one benefit from that and enjoy it. But should I have totally free bus fares? Should I have free prescriptions? We can only spend the money once, and now we find we're getting to a situation where people who are truly needing help and care in their homes, we're going to have to restrict that. It's all about choices. We can't have everything free and at the end of the day have people actually struggling and suffering as a result of it. So I would say to Shona Robertson and the First Minister to let's be a little more realistic going forward. I know it's brilliant and really popular to say that everything we do you'll get for free, but at the end of the day there is a cost. And we're seeing today that one of these costs is going to be the impact on Council's ability to deliver proper and effective social care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Lane next, please.
Thanks. Just to comment on the last comment, Councillor Robertson, you can easily not use your bus pass and you could pay your prescriptions. That's the choice of everybody within Scotland to do that, if your social conscience prevails. So what I always want to say is I know that Jackie and everybody in here works tremendously hard and they're doing their best, obviously, with the tools that they're given. I'd just like to pivot slightly and thank everybody who my mother being a recipient of healthcare, of the wonderful people that come in the door every day. They're far removed from this. Many of them are foreign nationals, and that's where the biggest crisis will come in a lot of areas of Perth and Kinross, is the UK government tightening up of immigration and coming to work here. We're going to lose people. That is as big a threat to providing care for people as the number of people that do it. I've got 9 Sri Lankans and 1 Romanian are the 10 people that come in a rota to look after my mother. That's a thing we're not talking about that here, but that's as big a threat as the finances to threat to looking after our elderly people in Perth and Kinross. Thank you. I want to thank all them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane, Councillor McEwen next.
Thank you, Provost. I think a lot of what I was going to say was already said, and I think Councillor Duff and Councillor Peter Barrett have spoken very well on this topic, and I think their enthusiasm at COSLA leaders and other COSLA meetings to advance Perth and Kinross's position is always very good. A couple of things that stick out at me with this is that, you know, we champion that we have this reduced cost per person, per population, and that's really good. My concern is it's been interpreted as it doesn't cost that much to actually introduce health and social care in Perth and Kinross. So even if our numbers are going to go up, it's not going to cost us that much more to do. And they're not seeing it as an efficiency, they're just seeing it as a low cost model. So I have a concern around that, and hopefully that can be emphasised when discussions happen. The second thing that's not mentioned, and I know through my continued work with NHS Tayside as a pharmacist, is that frailty has increased hugely since COVID. During lockdown, those in the elderly population isolated to their homes have come out of COVID, maybe not unwell, but with increased frailty, and that adds to the care package. It's not necessarily that there's just more of them. It's actually, rather than needing 3 days a week care, you now need 5 days a week care. No, you don't just need 1 visit a day, you now need 3 visits a day, because that increased frailty means that the things you can do for yourself have become a lot less. And that's some of the impact on the increased costs for that aged population. And I think that is a higher weighting than poverty in itself, which is what COSLA seem to be doing to adjust the numbers. And I think there's a huge flaw in there, and actually age and frailty are a much heavier weight on the cost of health and social care than poverty alone as an indicator. They're all important indicators, don't get me wrong, but it appears to me from what I have heard that the frailty aspect is being underplayed, and that's where the detriment is coming to the rural councils and to those with higher populations that are older and frail. I can't go aside by countering Councillor Robertson's comments on prescription charges as a pharmacist. If we reintroduce prescription charges, we'll make health worse. People do not take all their medicines if you make them pay for it. It's what happens in England, and people get worse, their health gets worse quicker, and that increases costs. So free prescriptions is actually a cost-saving exercise through a public health mechanism.
Thank you very much, Councillor McEwen. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. There is no doubt we are all we all find this subject really depressing for us. We want to solve it, and we're getting extremely frustrated and downhearted that our options keep closing. I really just want to highlight the efforts that everybody is making to get the Scottish Government to laser focus on this. My colleague, Councillor Peter Barrett, has put a huge amount of time and dedication into this. Eric Drysdale, Councillor Drysdale, Council Leader, we are all cited on this. And I'm just so disappointed that we're not sitting here with a little bit more positivity today. But I do thank Jackie and all your team, because you're dealing with this day in, day out, and it's tough going. But we are all united here, and thank you for everyone that's involved in trying to improve this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drysdale, do you wish to say anything in summing up?
Just very briefly, Provost, if I may. I'd like to thank everyone for their comments. Everybody has made a telling contribution. I absolutely agree with the points made by Councillor McEwen in terms of the impact of frailty on the trends that we're seeing here. But the fundamental point I just wanted to re-emphasise at this point is this councillor won't wheeshed about this. This is more important than anything, and I will continue to speak out and do what I think is right. But I do genuinely believe, I don't know, but I do genuinely believe that work will continue. As Councillor Rebeck made the point, this is the first reading of the budget. Work will continue. It's complicated. We all know that. Work will continue, and I hope that by working together with government and explaining this situation as clearly as we possibly can to them, that we can get a more positive outcome than we're looking at the moment. And I do believe that there is a willingness to try and do that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drysdale. Members, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you. Members will now break for lunch and we'll return at 2 p.m.